across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Drive Time. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's loads to discuss this Tuesday afternoon. Asylum seekers to be housed in military sites instead of hotels. The Prime Minister has said that by the end of this year, he wants that to be the case for all asylum seekers. That's a very, very big ambition. Can it actually happen? We'll talk to a number of experts in that. Also, Migrant Spin Up, a fury as a charity is bankrolled by the government using £385 million of your money, taxpayer cash, to put a positive spin on migration in schools. This is teaching children as young as 8 to see migration in a positive light. Yes, really. Also, one of the stories that really shocked me when I read this today, grooming gang families infiltrate charities to threaten survivors. This is many of these grooming gang scumbags going into charities, trying to get jobs there, people and their families trying to get jobs there, to intimidate people who've already been through a huge amount. Absolutely dreadful. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Nigel Farage riding high in the polls, another poll that says that he is now the favoured person to be the next Prime Minister of this country. Reform UK ahead again, and Labour at their lowest, 17% in, well, certainly in the last, since the election, certainly lowest poll. This is YouGov. Following on from my discussion with Ian as well, John says, talking about chocolate, how did they get a Malteser to be a perfect sphere? A guy I went to university with, I think his grandfather invented the machine that did it. His name was Will Semengo Turner. I'm not entirely sure what his grandfather was called. Lots to discuss, everything from Maltesers to the more serious issues between now and 7 o'clock. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and Samara Gill, who's coming up at 7 o'clock. Stay with me here on Talk Drive. Well, the Ministry of Defence is now involved in trying to close migrant hotels. Small group migrants will be housed in 2 army barracks in Scotland and the south of England from next month. Keir Starmer piling pressure, he says, on the Home Office to end asylum hotels within a year. Sorry, not by the end of the year, within a year. There are plans to build prefabricated modular units similar to porta cabins. They say that's cheaper and more appropriate. Really interesting use of language as well. Shabana Mahmood, who's the Home Secretary, apparently absolutely furious at the continuing use of hotels. We keep hearing this from government ministers. David Lammy was furious about what happened with the asylum seeker sex offender who was let out by mistake. We've heard about frustration, government ministers being frustrated. Yeah, Starmer, frustrated and angry about the soaring cost of the asylum system. You're the government. Okay, you can be as frustrated, you can be as angry, you can be as furious as you want to be. You're the ones who are responsible for sorting it out. Who are you furious with? Be furious with yourself and sort it out. Well, a Defence Minister, Luke Pollard, spoke to the BBC this morning about his department, the Ministry of Defence, stepping up to close asylum hotels.
Absolutely right, though, when the Prime Minister set out his ambition to close every single asylum hotel, that every government department does what it can to step up and support that mission. So we're working with the Home Office at the moment to look at where we have disused military facilities that could be used to house asylum seekers as their applications are processed. We're in discussions around a number of sites at the moment. It's right that I think that the MOD steps up to support this mission at this time, because I don't want to see a single asylum hotel open. I imagine your viewers don't as well. We've already closed 24 of them in the last year, saving £1 billion to the taxpayer, but I want to see every single one of them closed.
I wonder how realistic it is to close all the asylum hotels within a year. Let's speak to James Sunderland, Colonel James Sunderland, military expert, former MP himself as well. James, great to have you on the programme again. It's always good to hear your common sense. Is this realistic? Is this viable to do this within a year?
I think it's realistic, but it's also essential. I don't often back Labour policies, but Luke Pollard's got it right. We absolutely have to close these asylum hotels. They're too expensive. It's incentivising people to come across via small boats. And what we have to do now is to house migrants in a much more cost-effective manner, in an austere manner, if you like. And why not a military base?
Interesting you should mention that, and you mentioned some of the money as well, the austerity aspect of this. Keeping an asylum seeker in a hotel costs an average of £145 per person per night. This, of course, would be a lot cheaper, and actually there are so many disused military sites that this seems to make sense. But the point, I suppose, is, or one of the points in all of this, is that processing just needs to be a lot faster, doesn't it, James?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think there are set-up costs involved. Think back to COVID and the Nightingale hospitals. It's a very similar thing that I think the government is planning for migrants at the moment. But ultimately, it's about saving money. I think military bases are the right place to put them, not necessarily behind the wire. We don't want them mixing with regular soldiers. We don't want them jeopardising security. But why not a disused military base, an old airfield, where we can put a perimeter fence around the outside, build these porter cabin type functions, give them essential life support, and give them what they need to survive. And ultimately, you know, we're not going to be incentivising people to cross the channel by putting them in a hotel, so it is the right thing to do.
What about the military servicemen and women at the moment? What effect would this have on them? Some of these proposed sites, as you say, are disused completely. Some of them are adjacent to or part of sites where there are military people there. For our servicemen and women, I mean, so many stories I've covered over many years about the fact we're not housing them correctly. If you're setting up more accommodation for asylum seekers, should the focus be instead or as well on making sure that accommodation for those who serve their country is at least as good, if not better?
I totally agree. I mean, you can't have a situation where migrants are housed in accommodation that's superior to armed forces personnel. We've got to sort the defence estate out. We know that. Work is underway, was under my government. But what's really important is the fact that we do the minimum necessary to house migrants and look after them, give them the life support they need. But there are some concerns. You can't mix migrants with regular soldiers on a military base. They have to be separate. Hence why we need to be using disused bases. But also, if you look at what's planned in Sussex, in Crowborough, that's a cadet training camp. So by putting 900 to 1,000 migrants in Sussex, in Crowborough, what you're then doing is denying those cadets the training opportunity. So there will be a cost, there will be an impact to the MOD. And once again, it's clear to me that the MOD is coming to the rescue of other government departments, as of course the MOD has a very proud record of doing.
It's very interesting as well that I just wonder what you think of my point just before the clip there. I don't know if you heard it, about Starmer saying he's frustrated and angry about the soaring cost of the asylum system. Shabana Mahmood saying she's absolutely furious of the continuing use of hotels. Am I being too critical when I say, hold on a second guys, you're the government, you can be as furious as you like, but channel that fury into actually sorting things out, and maybe what they're doing here is actually something positive to sort that out. I just wonder what your perspective on that was, James.
No, Peter, you underplayed it. Ultimately, politics is about responsibility. It's about taking responsibility. You get elected to do a job, and to say that you're furious and frustrated, to express emotion in that way, A, it's unprofessional, and secondly, it's their responsibility. So why not take the responsibility? Why not actually deliver the effect that's required, rather than hiding behind this veil? It's frustrating to me as a military man. People have got a job to do. Get on with the job and deliver it, and if not, get voted out.
Are you surprised that the poll for the Times by YouGov has Labour at just 17%?
Not surprised at all. I mean, the government has not performed well so far. The economy is in freefall. Unemployment's increasing every month since Labour came in. There are many people out there who voted Labour who I've spoken to on the doorstep locally who now have buyer's remorse. So I think the polling is a reflection of dissatisfaction with government. And it's also a clear message. Socialism does not work. This is the British people rejecting socialism. And once again, we need a right-leaning government in place to put the mess right.
James, thank you. That is Colonel James Sunderland, military expert and former MP. Appreciate your contribution to the programme. James Mathewson, former Labour spokesman, is with us as well. Good afternoon to you, James.
Good afternoon, Peter.
Let me ask you the same question. We'll get to the migration bit in a second, but are you surprised that the YouGov poll for the Times finds just 17% of voters would back Labour if there were a general election today?
No, not at all. And nobody in the Labour Party would be surprised either. I think it's, it's not some kind of great secret as to how bad it's been, and the kind of free for all the free fall they've been in with regard to kind of public opinion, because things haven't been going well. And as a result, they've lost support from people who gave them their vote at the last election. But they're also increasingly losing support from people who've supported them for a very long time, Peter, myself included.
Would you vote Labour if there was an election tomorrow?
No.
You would not vote Labour any longer?
No.
Who would you vote for?
I had this conversation yesterday on the radio, actually, on BBC, and I would have to consider Zach Polanski and his Green Party at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't agree with him on everything. I don't agree with his position on NATO. I don't agree with his defence positions. They concern me. So, at
do
the
you
moment,
agree with his
right
position? Do you agree with his most important policy position, which is that women can think themselves to larger breasts?
Look, every politician's weird, Peter. You know this.
Not that weird. Not necessarily that weird.
No, Peter. They're all weirdos. There's none of them at all. So I don't know. But look,
the good news is, James, that their advisors are all perfectly normal people. We're the control sample. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Let me ask you on a much more serious note about this migration story, and actually similar question to what I asked James Sunderland a minute ago. About Starmer being frustrated and angry about the soaring cost of the asylum system. Shabana Mahmood saying she's absolutely furious. I mean, surely they can just channel that into sorting it out, and maybe they're doing that. What do you think of this idea of housing migrants on military bases?
I'm not sure what I think about it, really. I defer to people with the expertise in this area as to whether it's logistically feasible or not. I've long said, and I've said on this show before, that it's not, migration isn't one of my personal priorities. I understand other people have issues about it, but I just do not see right now where the level of rhetoric is and the conversation that we have about this day in, day out in the media versus what can actually be done by government versus what any government can do.
Although the government is saying that they can perhaps get them all to military accommodation within a year. I mean, that would be a major logistical thing for, many tens of thousands.
I'd be amazed if any British government can do anything within a year, to be honest, Peter. I mean, you've seen it up close. I've seen it relatively close. I just don't have faith in the British state to be able to do things like that. It just doesn't seem to have the capacity or the wherewithal, even if it had the political kind of drive at the top of it. And I think, Shabana Mahmood and Keir Starmer's comments are them trying to garner sympathy from the public and say, this is what we think, we agree with you, we believe in it, but trying to make themselves sound powerless in it. I think you're right. It's not a good look.
What could Labour do to get your vote back? I mean, you literally worked long hours, long days for the Labour Party, and you've just said a few minutes ago that you wouldn't vote for them if there was an election tomorrow. What do you think they need to do to get your vote back? You're on the left, of course, but also people who are fleeing them for, Greens like you, Lib Dems, other people as well, other parties, your party as well, or whatever Jeremy Corbyn's party is called, and similarly on the right, some Labour people who voted for Labour at the last election are going to Reform UK. Is Labour being pulled in two different directions, or has it got any direction?
It is, but I think the solution to that doesn't need to be two different things. The people who are leaving to go to Reform and all the rest of it, there's many different reasons for doing that, immigration being one of them. But it's not just all about policy, is it? It's about the actual offer and the credibility of the government. For me, Keir Starmer needs to go. I don't support Keir Starmer's leadership. I can't support it. I voted for him in the leadership election based on what he was promising at that time. I've been let down. Everybody who did so, who I've spoken to, believes they've been let down as well in what he promised. But at the same time, their leadership needs to change, but the direction of the party needs to change and needs to be based on values and beliefs that it actually has, not in being weather vane politicians who will blow with the wind in any direction wherever the wind is blown strongest. Because people look to Nigel Farage, they look to Zach Polanski, they like the same things about both of those people. And what are they? They're authentic, they're credible, and they believe what they're saying. That's the crucial thing.
James, final question. Jeremy Corbyn is going to appear in a pantomime in Islington as the Wizard of Oz. Would you travel along the yellow brick road to see him turning a wheel?
Look, if I never see Jeremy Corbyn again, Peter, I'll be happy. You talk about the years that I gave and that other people gave. I saw people, emotionally blackmailed throughout the years of working for the Labour Party, who gave up their weekends, gave up, I had a colleague who gave up time with his dying parent to stay and work on the 2019 general election. And unfortunately, what we saw from Mr. Corbyn and the people around him was that they frittered away an opportunity to try and change this country in a direction that I would like to see this country changing. And they don't take anything seriously. What they want is they want a gathering of friends and people who agree with them so they can all sit around and make jam and agree with each other and talk about how evil Margaret Thatcher was. That's not what I'm interested in, Peter. I agree with them on all of that. But I want to change the world. I want to change the country. I want to change people's lives. And I don't think those people are serious about doing so. So to see him in a pantomime, I've already seen him in one. It was called the Labour Party between 2016 and 2019.
That is a great line. I'm going to get that out in socials. Thank you, James. Much appreciated. James Mathewson, appreciate that. That's James Mathewson, who is a former Labour spokesman. On the migration point, loads of people getting in touch. Andy in Sheffield saying the government aren't getting it. They are just not listening to the people. We don't want any migration anymore, whether illegal or legal. It's costing taxpayers billions. Our infrastructure is not suitable for the number of people coming into the country. We want the boats to stop. That is what we want. Great show, Peter, says Andy in Sheffield. Thank you, Andy. And in Chelmsford, I think it's Dawn, who says people should not get their hopes up about alternative accommodation for migrants. The former Wethersfield airbase currently used is not secure because migrants can come and go. Thank you for that. Benjamin Netanyahu, some breaking news, has ordered his military to immediately carry out powerful attacks on Gaza. We'll bring you more when we have it. The ceasefire hanging by a thread there, or being violated by both sides, depending on which way you look at it. Nigel is in London and wants to talk about the army barracks. Nigel, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, good afternoon, Peter. Thank you very much. I'd like to start off by saying whether it's Labour or whether it's the Conservatives, they have no appetite at all in stopping illegal immigration. Had they wanted to, they would have done so. And for me, when Labour say they want to stop people having being housed in migrant hotels, they of course encouraged it and pay people or hoteliers to do this. And of course people who have flats around the country as well. And I think what's important here is what this government and the previous government have refused to address. It's simple. If you enter a country, in particular this country at the moment, or any country, and you do not have documentation, you do not go through a port, you are an illegal immigrant. And in this country, you breach Section 3 and Section 24 of the Immigration Act. And what they should do, instead of having moving deck chairs around the Titanic and saying, oh, let's put them in a military base, why don't they just build a proper, secure prison or migrant centre to house people who commit criminal offences, so they're kept away from the public, they're kept away from committing further offences or the possibility of committing offences. They are policed, they are seen to be where they are, and they can be monitored and checked.
Nigel, thanks for your thoughts there. That's Nigel in London. I'm sure loads of our viewers and listeners will agree with that. Tell us your thoughts on all of this. Is it fair to move these people to army bases? Is that the best idea? Should the processing work better, or maybe they just shouldn't be here in the first place? 0344 499 1000. Thanks to Reg. He says, I'm just listening to you talk about Labour being low in the polls. Right now I reckon Keir Starmer is less popular than Prince Andrew. Now that would be a low rating. Tracy's in Chinkford and said army bases would be great as long as the refugees are not allowed to roam the streets. And thank you to the person who has complimented my haircut. It is all the work of Ahmed, my barber. Stay with us here on Talk.
they genuinely don't think it's an issue that there are a load of people who are undocumented young males from far-flung countries from a very different culture from ours who have completely different attitudes to women and girls, that particularly that they have coming to this country and breaking into this country illegally in the middle of the day. They genuinely think we're all racist and bigoted. They're thinking it's a problem. So they pretend to deal with it and they want us to stop talking about it, because the solution is not to stop them coming in or to get rid of them. The solution is for everyone to shut the hell up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We'll bring you more on that breaking news that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has ordered his military to immediately carry out powerful attacks on Gaza. That is a developing story, and we will see what happens there. There is, of course, context that remains that were given back yesterday by Hamas terrorists were of a hostage that the remains had already been recovered, so it wasn't a new hostage. That has caused a lot of heartache and annoyance, and of course the bodies of those hostages murdered by Hamas terrorists have not been fully repatriated. All the living hostages, the 20 living hostages that remain in Gaza, are back. But of course, there are many remains, corpses of murdered hostages that haven't been given back, or the wrong remains have been given back. That's something Hamas has done previously, and this is a big issue, especially with the ceasefire brokered by President Trump. We'll talk more about that as the show goes on. In the meantime, I want to talk about Nigel Farage and the rape gangs scandal. He is doing very well in the polls at the moment, and indeed the most favoured person for Prime Minister. Yesterday he had a press conference and he talked about London being the last great grooming scandal to be uncovered. This is what Nigel Farage said yesterday.
He's been denying that there's grooming going on in London. The police, the Met, have been denying grooming is going on in London. I can tell you today, somebody who's in this room has spoken to social services in London who've openly said there are grooming gangs in London. And of course, it's more difficult to spot a particular type of grooming gang in central London than it is in Rotherham, just by the sheer size of the city, by the different communities that live in this city. Yes, maybe, Maggie Oliver made this point, you know, maybe London is the last great grooming scandal to be uncovered. And it looks like we're very close to that.
Well, there was lots of criticism of the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, Sir Sadiq Khan, Knight of the Realm, and his view on this was made clear as well.
Make sure that no stone is left unturned in relation to this appalling, heinous, horrific crime. And so I've asked the police to be fully transparent, and that's one of the reasons why they've shared with Londoners and those across the country that as part of the national inquiry, the national review, the police will be going back 15 years, looking at all the cases under the government's, under the inquiry's definition. That includes group-based child sexual exploitation. It will also include peer-to-peer child sexual exploitation, intrafamilial child sexual exploitation, that exploitation that took place in institutions like care homes, peer-to-peer exploitation, criminal gangs as well, to make sure no stone is left unturned to address this heinous crime.
Sir Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London there. It's worth pointing out that he is, of course, the Police and Crime Commissioner for London. Lots of other places it's a different person, it's a different elected role, but he, as Mayor of London, is the Police and Crime Commissioner. Peter Blexley is the former Metropolitan Police detective and our crime commentator here on Talk. Peter, lovely to talk to you this afternoon, although it's a very serious topic. What is your take on what Sadiq Khan has said? Because Nigel Farage is slightly saying one thing and he's saying another. It does seem to me that Sadiq Khan was denying this was a major problem. He now says, as we've heard in that clip, that he's taking action on it. What is your analysis of this, Peter?
There is a nauseating irony listening to Sadiq Khan, this pious, horrible man who for so long has deflected, ducked, acquiesced, ignored, stalled, and basically failed to answer the question as to whether there are sexual grooming gangs, in other words, child rape gangs, operating in London. Finally, he bows to pressure because, fortunately, victims, the finest political orator of our time, Nigel Farage, has kept the pressure on, along with journalists and many others, and I have nothing but praise for anyone that has boxed him into the corner, whereby he has finally had to admit it. And now, of course, the Metropolitan Police also turning turtle and telling us that they've got 9,000 cases they're looking at. Shame upon those people. Now let's look forward. Let's get proper, proactive, professional, prompt investigations carried out, and let's slap the handcuffs on.
I wonder if I can ask you about another story. This is a really shocking story in the Times today. Grooming gang families infiltrating charities to threaten survivors. These people who are family members of those who have been convicted are applying for jobs at charities to threaten and intimidate victims into silence. Apparently it's really common in the sector, according to the managing director of one organisation that helped 4 girls abused by Rochdale rape gangs. This quotation from the managing director, Paul O'Rourke: once the gang in Rochdale found out where the young people were, they tried to infiltrate, to get access to them, to interfere with them as witnesses, to threaten them. They also tried to recruit them back into the grooming gang because they were still very vulnerable. Is there no depth to which these people will not sink?
Really not. This is a very, very important story. And Mr. Paul O'Rourke, whose name you have mentioned, is a hero. As he points out, you can run a charity helping child rape gang victims for 20 years and do sterling, wonderful work, help these victims rebuild their lives. But if you lower your guard and on one occasion, one of these pious, revolting people tries to get into your charity, succeeds, and then is able to bring pressure upon victims, either to not give evidence or, once again, be groomed and sucked back in to the rape gangs, then of course all your work falls apart. Your reputation lies in tatters. People who are doing this, applying for jobs, they are relatives, victims, friends, people connected to child rapists. At the very, very least, they are attempting to pervert the course of justice, a very serious criminal offence. I look forward to hearing from the police about the investigations that are going to be launched into these cases. And once again, I want doors kicked in, people dragged out of their bed and thrown into police vans having been arrested. This is yet another sickening layer upon the child rape gangs scandal.
And sharing information, clearly an issue here as well. Again, this guy, Paul O'Rourke, says even when these people were known by the local authority, somehow, on a rare occasion, safeguarding hadn't shared that information or intelligence with us as providers. Now, Peter, I expect you've been through DBS checks at one stage. I certainly have. I work with a young man. I do a bit of volunteering with a guy who's in the care system. He's nearly 21 now. We're about to finish our placement that's been going on for a few years. And, you know, I've been through those DBS checks, and the problem is that people say, oh, well, that person's been through a disclosure and borrowing service check. They've had their criminal records checked. They must be all right. There mustn't be an issue because the system is there. But if you don't know about this and this kind of activity happens and the local authority isn't sharing the information correctly, well, that's something that I think that the inquiry, the badly needed inquiry that needs to start as soon as possible, needs to look at, explore and solve.
Without a doubt, and it's a matter that very much needs to be put, I would suggest, in the House of Commons to the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips. This is under her remit. It's part of what she does. And if there are loopholes being exploited that need to be closed, then that needs to happen as a matter of urgency. but primarily as a former detective, I want the evidence gathered so that people can be arrested. It's an extremely serious thing. It's kind of like a modern day equivalent of what we used to call jury nobbling, when people would find their way to approach juries and then get them to deliver perverse and incorrect verdicts. It's a similar yet dissimilar kind of attempt to offend, and it's extremely serious.
Peter, as always, thank you. Peter Blexley there, former Metropolitan Police detective and our crime commentator here on Talk. Leslie's been in touch and says, I have a good idea about illegal migrants. Why don't we do what other countries do with those who break into their country? They deport them. Leslie, so simple, yet so sensible. And Darryl in Blackburn says, this nonsense Labour are furious as nonsense. Nothing in their rhetoric ever mentions actually stopping illegal migration. It's always about processing more quickly. They will put £900 in barracks, rapidly giving them leave to remain, move them back into homes of multiple occupancy and repeat the process. No intent to curb it, believes Darryl. And Paul's been in touch about Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn's going to play the Wizard of Oz. A pretty good role for him, I think. There are lots of parallels between his leadership of the Labour Party and the Wizard of Oz. Long road and then really nothing at the end of it apart from a man turning a wheel behind a curtain. Paul has been in touch and says, will Corbyn's pantomime include a scene with an enchanted allotment? I hope the answer to that is, oh yes it will. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you everybody who's getting in touch. We'll get to more calls in a second. Quite a few funny jokes as well about Jeremy Corbyn as well. Where's your career, Jeremy? It's behind you. Joe Twyman is with us now, the founder of Delta Poll. Jeremy Corbyn now seems a distant memory, especially as a poll for the Times finding that just 17% of voters would back the party in a general election held today. Bad for Labour. But first, Joe, your reaction on the most important story of the day, which is that Jeremy Corbyn is going to be the Wizard of Oz in a pantomime.
Well, can I say on behalf of all of your viewers and listeners how disappointed I am that you have spoilt the ending of The Wizard of Oz, and now I'm obliged not to watch it since you have spoilt the ending. So I hope you can improve.
Well, I think that's very sad. I mean, a more appropriate role would maybe David Lammy could play the Scarecrow if he only had a brain. Tell us your thoughts on YouGov and the fact that they found that Labour would only be voted for by 70% of voters.
Well, it's a fascinating finding, but actually more interesting perhaps below the line, if you like, below the top headline, when you look at the smaller parties. But there's no doubt that Reform have been the success story of really since the general election, and this is yet another good poll performance for them. They've led in every poll since the local elections. But when you look at individual pollsters and you look at the trends that each pollster themselves has, you can see that actually the picture is pretty consistent when it comes to Reform. If you take YouGov, for instance, you have to go back to April to see the last time that Reform were higher than 26, sorry, higher than 29 or lower than 26. Mm-hmm. They've been within that very narrow margin of error now for months and months and months. And so the long-term trend suggests that they're not making any significant gains, at least not yet. What's more interesting is the collapse of Labour. And actually, we're now at a situation where we have the Lib Dems on 15%, the Greens on 16%, and the Conservatives and Labour on 17%. Mm-hmm. That is a completely unprecedented situation. And what that means for a general election, even though it's 3.5 years until a general election, what that means for the first part of the post system that we have in this country is, it's anyone's guess, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that, Joe, and I suppose the point that I would ask as well is about the personal popularity of Nigel Farage and how good a Prime Minister he would be, because those ratings are very interesting as well in this.
Yes, we know that historically speaking, the party that has the strongest performance when it comes to leadership and the strongest performance when it comes to the economy wins the most seats at the general election. That's what happens. It's the case every time. And so if you can get both of those, you win the game. This poll shows that Nigel Farage is ahead of Keir Starmer and indeed Kemi Badenoch and the other leaders, placing him in the strongest position. But it's worth pointing out that his performance is still relatively poor. None of the political leaders are particularly resonating with people. With Nigel Farage, he, yes, has a large proportion of people who support him, but he also has a large proportion of people who strongly oppose him, and that's really what's holding his scores back from going
going it's really
higher.
Interesting you mentioned that.
Opposition.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, Joe, because when you look at Caerphilly and you look at clearly some tactical voting there last week in that Welsh Assembly election, there's clearly an anyone but Nigel vote there, and I wonder whether the polling and how people are actually voting when there are by-elections is pointing you towards that, because I think it's only just starting for Nigel Farage. I think there will be some sort of coalescing on the left. Maybe it's tactical voting, maybe it's tacit agreements, maybe it's actual electoral pacts to keep Nigel Farage out as much as possible. I think that is what the left is going to do, and I just wonder from your analytical standpoint of polls whether you think there's credence to that.
Yes, absolutely. It would be the logical thing to do, and though politicians don't always behave logically, they do at least try to when it comes to elections. But that is no easy task, particularly when you have constituencies where potentially 5 different candidates could be in with a chance of winning. Who do you decide then? If you're doing some sort of formal or informal pact, who do you decide who gets that constituency? Or if you're just sort of taking your foot off the gas a bit, if you're one party, which constituency do you choose to do that? It gets very complicated very quickly. It's very easy to over-analyse what happened in Caerphilly because we know that by-elections are weird and unusual in many different respects. But I think what it does demonstrate is the fact that the kind of headlines that we've seen saying that Nigel Farage will be the next Prime Minister, that is just speculation. And yes, you can speculate that he will be the next Prime Minister. You can speculate that he won't be. But Caerphilly shows the power that tactical voting has, at least in potential. The question now is, how can that be delivered at the ballot box? Because it's not going to be picked up in polling, because there's no point asking people at the moment in this hypothetical election that's taking place in 3.5 years' time. Imagine how you would vote and would you vote tactically. Very few people would be able to answer that with any degree of accuracy. And so it's coming. It will be a factor at the general election, but working out the degree to which it matters is going to be extraordinarily difficult with so many parties vying in each constituency.
Joe Twyman, the Prince Charming of polling and founder of Delta Poll, thank you very much indeed for joining me today. Graham has been in touch from Bushy saying, with Jeremy Corbyn being in Panto, will Zara Sultana play Cinderella? Although they both won't go to the ball if Donald Trump is the guest of honour to the King and Queen, says Graham. Lots more to discuss on this. We'll also check in with Colonel Simon Diggins in a minute. He is obviously a military analyst and former senior officer in the UK Army, about what's happening in Gaza, because there are reports that Hamas has postponed a deceased hostage handover. Is the ceasefire all falling apart? We'll get Simon's superior analysis in just a minute here on Talk.
Whoever signed off on this needs to be sacked, right?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? What do you mean you don't know? You mean that wasn't a mistake?
Yes, obviously it shouldn't have been released. However,
fire them!
Somewhere in administration, from the courts, the paperwork, I can see that he should not have been released.
Yeah, I think that might be the case, Sam.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk to Colonel Simon Diggins now, who is a military analyst and former senior officer in the UK Army. Simon, thank you for joining us on short notice, because there is breaking news out of Gaza and Israel in that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the military to immediately carry out strikes in Gaza. There seem to be many problems here, not least that there are 13 bodies of hostages still in Gaza. Hamas saying it had recovered the body of a hostage that it plans to hand over this evening, but now possibly putting that on hold. Netanyahu ordering his military to immediately carry out strikes in Gaza. Is the ceasefire all falling apart, Simon?
Peter, good evening to you. I mean, I think the ceasefire is under pressure. I think it was always going to be with difficulties because of the nature of Hamas, the nature of the war that's taken place, and particularly the difficulties of trying to return bodies from a conflict that's now over 2 years old. And I think that's the situation. I think we've also got the challenge we've got with Hamas not necessarily being in fully control of what's going on. The incident took place on Sunday, which resulted again in Israeli counter-strikes. Was essentially because they had Hamas fighters who were close to a tunnel exit, which was spotted by the Israelis. They opened fire, Hamas opened fire, and the Israelis then responded again. So I think that's kind of where we are. The other situation we've got is that there are elements, particularly in the Israeli side, who actually want the ceasefire to collapse completely. So there's a sort of countervailing pressure. Trump, Netanyahu, I think, under pressure, wants the ceasefire to keep going, but there are people within Israel who are constantly hammering on Netanyahu, saying, you can't trust Hamas, and this is a good example of how they actually behave. And I think we can all understand how that sentiment has arisen. Yes, certainly, and we're in Netanyahu's in a particularly difficult position here. What is the international reaction likely to be, especially when Donald Trump was talking about solving, as he put it the other day, 8 wars in 8 months? Yeah, I think Donald Trump is very keen to bring this to a close, and he's worked hard, I think, to do so. But it's very much the way Donald Trump does his business, and what kind of peace he's looking for from there. I think the pressure from the international community, though, will be for the Israelis to respond, because they have a legitimate right so to do, but not to over respond, and not to bring about the complete ceasefire collapse. So I think that's the conversation will be running around from the various chancelleries at the moment, Netanyahu, and to various other governments, and say, OK, if you have to respond, but don't make the whole thing fall over. Simon, thank you, and thanks for joining us on short notice. That is Colonel Simon Diggins, their military analyst, former senior officer in the UK Army. Thank you to him. We're going to talk now to Sir John Redwood, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, about the threat of a mansion tax on 150,000 homeowners who could be hit by Labour's proposed mansion tax. Experts warning rumours about budget tax rises already hitting the housing market. The Treasury reportedly considering Rachel Reeves taxing owners of higher value properties. This is in just less than a month when the budget occurs because of the multi-billion pound hole in the public finances. This is the consideration of an annual 1% tax on the portion of a property's value over £2 million. So in a £2.5 million house, it would cost £5,000 a year in this tax. Now, John, obviously most people don't live in homes costing £2 million or more, but I think most people will have an opinion on whether this is fair or not, and also whether it'll raise anywhere near the amount of money that Rachel Reeves needs. Or maybe, I don't know what your view is, we'll find out in a second, but maybe this is just more kind of jealousy, the kind of ideas that were put forward with the VAT on school fees, that actually a pointless tax that doesn't really raise anywhere near the kind of money that the Treasury needs, which is by itself just class warfare. I wonder what your perspective on this is.
Yeah, it's a jealousy tax, which at best would raise a very small amount of revenue compared with the very big black hole she claims she's got. But it would do a lot of damage. I mean, it's first of all targeted on the parts of the country with higher house prices, in parts of central London. That's not a very big flat, whereas obviously in other parts of the country you get a very big house indeed for that kind of money. And there could be quite a lot of elderly people who bought their properties a long time ago, who wish to see out their days in their existing property. They have very little income. but suddenly their property has gone up in recent years by a significant amount, and they would then be stung for an enormous tax on what little pension they're getting in. So that would be extremely unfair and produce lots of hard cases. And they've already smashed the London property market very dramatically with over-regulation and too much tax. They've been too greedy. So they've had a crisis meeting this week and had to announce crisis measures to try and get any new houses built in London at all, because it's slumped, practically none being built. And that is about regulation and overtaxing. And this was just another thing which dries up the market, and it means that people don't move on because they're gripped by the uncertainty and worry about it all.
Could we be in a situation where people are sort of trapped? You talk about, obviously, people who are asset rich but cash poor, turning to schemes that are sometimes a bit dodgy, things like equity release schemes, things like when you're perhaps selling a property, but then you've got a huge amount of capital gains tax as well, and you're trying to downsize. There are tough choices that people, and especially people who I mean, it seems odd to say this, but they live in a home that is perhaps worth a huge amount of money, maybe worth far more than they paid for it, but nonetheless be very badly penalised by this.
Yeah, well, that's right. And they do feel locked in because, as you rightly say, they could have a capital gains tax liability if it's not their only home. But they would certainly have a big stamp duty liability, because if they're trading down from an expensive flat in central London to an even smaller flat in central London, for example, there'd be a very big stamp duty on the one they're purchasing. So their capital will be further eroded when they really need, if they're going to sell their house, to free more of that capital to get a bit more income.
Do you think it's correct to say we're already seeing an impact on the property market, given the fact that this is just being speculated about, and what we see all the time, this time every year really, before a budget, the month, 2 months beforehand, we see so many people saying we must spend money on this, otherwise this particular part of the economy or public service will fall apart, versus this tax may or may not happen. And what I think happens, in fact I kind of know what happens because I was in government myself for 3.5 years, is that often there are test balloons that are floated, and then they just see what happens and then make a decision based on the public reaction.
No, I agree. I just wish Rachel Reeves would listen to good advice, because some of us want her to do well. We'd like our economy to do better and people be better off. But this is groundhog budget. We had all this last year. We had a 2-month run up to a late budget with every kind of tax rise being threatened on people. So a lot of people and businesses just simply were petrified and did nothing. So you had a slump in confidence and a slump in activity. And then, of course, you had even less revenue to play with, because the forecasts had to show that the economy wasn't doing as well and people weren't undertaking as many transactions to pay them extra tax. And then she's doing exactly the same thing again this year. Why? You know, it's the job of the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to sensibly talk up the prospects and the outlook so that businesses commit investments and people buy things that they want to buy, that people are prepared to move from a house or a flat that they're less pleased with to one that would be more suited to their current needs. But if all the time they're thinking, I could get caught on this, I could get caught by a big tax rise, then it's all slump and doom.
Yeah. John, as always, thank you. Sir John Redwood there, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister. Let's speak to Michael in High Wycombe. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Michael, what do you make of this idea of a mansion tax?
It's just bananas, isn't it? I mean, Sir John's always good value, but thank you for calling back. The issue is just that people who are clever and smart will see this and just go, well, I wasn't going to gift my house to my children because I have to then pay them rent. So what I'll do now is, rather than paying tax, I'll gift the house to my children and I'll pay the tax I would have paid to them as rent every year. I mean, it's just absurd. They're just creating another tax loophole. I mean, they're just bonkers. It
just feels that Rishi Sunak was right when he said in that debate. Do you remember that debate he had with Keir Starmer? He said, whatever it is, they'll tax it. Your car, they'll tax it. Your job, they'll tax it. Your home, they'll tax it. And that just does seem to be the case. And I think it was a relatively, well, pretty stupid idea, actually, to say that income tax, VAT and national insurance were not going to be touched, because they're 75% of all the tax income that the Treasury and HMRC gets, Michael. So they've got to look in different ways. They've got to do this in a different way. Otherwise, they're going to break their own fiscal rules and their pledges at the election.
And the problem is that these people don't seem to understand the more pressure you put into the tax system, the more the Laffer curve comes against you.
Just explain the Laffer curve to those of us who have an idea what it is, but maybe not entirely sure, Michael.
Well, the Laffer curve is just the more that you tax people, the less you're likely to get in.
Yeah.
It's just inelastic.
Yeah.
So
it would be fair to say that it's sort of like when you tax multimillionaires, for example, and they all leave. I mean, they're actually put off by the tax.
Yes, and if people find ways to go around the tax, all legitimate, and all you're creating is an industry that says, well, this is a cheaper way of doing it, so don't pay tax, pay this cost, or pay that submission, or pay that entry-level investment. And people just go, why should I give all my money to the government? Yeah. They're just going to not do that. They're going to invest in their families, invest in their children, and just remove the property from being able to be taxed. Yeah. It's just crazy. Crazy.
Michael, thank you. That's Michael in High Wycombe there. Lots of people getting in touch about this, including Terry, who says, with the mansion tax, no wonder Prince Andrew is trying to move out of Royal Lodge. This wouldn't be a big jump for his peppercorn rent, would it? Mark in Croydon says, clearly the housing market needs reform, but you can't have stamp duty and then say you have to pay yearly tax as well. I moved recently and the stamp duty paid could have been spent in retail and trades for home improvements, and now those will have to wait, says Mark in Croydon. Reg says, how could they possibly make the property tax work with property prices fluctuating up and down constantly? Something you could be paying tax on today might be 50 or 60,000 pounds cheaper in 12 months' time. It will never be possible to do. You'll constantly be having your house valued. And if someone's, Leslie says, if someone is lucky enough to have a £2 million home, will have to pay £10,000 to the government every year. That's like paying rent to the government to stay in the home you bought and paid for. That is a very, very interesting point. Leslie, thank you. We'll debate that more. We'll also get the latest on Hamas. We'll talk about migration as well. All of the things you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. There are loads of messages coming in about the mansion tax, about equity release, about the property market, and about migration as well. Also about the fact that Jeremy Corbyn is going to appear in pantomime. Oh yes, he is. Lots to discuss here on Talk in the next hour. There are so many stories around about migration. We're going to talk to Isabel Oakeshott about that in a second. Talk's international editor, about asylum seekers to be housed in military sites instead of hotels. This charity bankrolled by the Home Office using taxpayer cash to put a positive spin on migration to school children. We'll also talk about the Employment Rights Bill with a Labour supporting think tank that says actually they've got to tone things down. We'll also talk about the sport this hour with Sean Costas from The Sun and get all of your thoughts on all the topics we're talking about today. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note, less than a minute please, to 0344 499 1000. That's the number for WhatsApp text messages and phone calls too. Loads to discuss. Let's get the conversation started here on Talk Drive. Bob says whoever says food inflation is around 5% doesn't do the shopping. Also says there's nothing dodgy about equity release schemes provided you get good advice. I worry about the people who don't, Bob, to be brutally honest. Also, there are many people saying about the mansion tax. London Oil Trader says, how can you have one mansion tax level across the UK and consider it fair? And someone else says, will the king pay the mansion tax? Also on Hamas, we'll be discussing this more before the end of the programme. You can't trust Hamas, they don't want a ceasefire, says Pete. Jane says the Labour government have been one big pantomime since last July. Unfortunately, it is no laughing matter. That is Jeremy Corbyn, who's going to appear as the Wizard of Oz. Isabel Oakeshott is Talk's international editor. Isabel, great to talk to you. Lots of serious things to talk about, but Jeremy Corbyn, clearly an interesting one as well. I wonder if you could tell me your thoughts. I mean, leading people to go on a long journey down Yellow Brick Road only to find a man behind a curtain turning a wheel at the end of it. Is that a fitting metaphor for Jeremy Corbyn?
I mean, doesn't really need to act for any pantomime. I mean, he already is a complete pantomime figure, isn't he? I just don't even think it's worth wasting any time thinking about Jeremy Corbyn at this point, except to say that, you know, the polling out today on the surge in support for radical left, hard left-wing parties is actually of real significance. It suggests a real polarisation of British politics, with Labour struggling just 1 point ahead of the Greens. And, you know, this is a Green Party under an extraordinarily hard left new leadership. And I think that really is an interesting dynamic to watch in the months and years ahead, as politics in the UK increasingly basically dividing, you know, pushing harder to the right and pushing harder to the left, and perhaps parties in the middle, or like to think they're in the middle, are actually going to sink between these two great big precipices.
It's really interesting you say that. I mean, when I grew up in Northern Ireland, we had the extremes did well and became more mainstream and softened their lines as a result. So it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, some people accusing Nigel Farage of softening his line on a few things and becoming more mainstream to have a wider appeal. I mean, something he's not going to be accused of softening his line on is this story with the government saying that asylum seekers are to be housed in military sites instead of hotels. Small boat migrants to be housed in 2 army barracks in Scotland and the south of England from next month. Starmer piling pressure in the Home Office to end the use of asylum hotels within a year. Do you think this can be done within a year, and is it a desirable outcome, or does it just push the issue away and say, well, you know, surely processing is what needs to be sorted? Although actually, for many people who live in areas where there are asylum hotels, maybe they will welcome it and say, actually, get these people out of their area.
Well, I think getting them out of town centres is a very good idea, and, you know, generally military barracks are not in the middle of towns, so There are a few exceptions to that, not quite in the middle, but I'm thinking of an RAF base near my home. It's very near a town. But in any case, generally, I really like the idea of putting up asylum seekers if we have to have a continuing flow of them, and that's another debate. Yes, let's get them into disused military accommodation, but crucially, I think they need to be detained. You know, I know this would require change in law and international treaties and so on, but one of the huge issues we have now in any setting that they are put up in is the ability just to melt away. There's no obligation to stay in a migrant hotel. You know, you can come and go as you please and get up to all manner of no good, as we see in our courts every single week. So how about we go a step further and turn these disused military accommodation to actual detention centres? And you made an important point about processing claims quicker. For Talk, I've just been interviewing, putting together what I hope is going to be a very, very interesting interview with a young man that spent some time working in a migrant hotel. And he is aware of cases of asylum applicants who are still waiting after several years for their claims to be processed. And you know, that's awful for everybody. If they are genuine asylum seekers, that's appalling for them. It's appalling for the British taxpayer. And do we really think most of these people who are kept waiting for claims to be processed for long, long periods, whether it's, you know, 3 months or 3 years, and genuinely that was one of the cases I'm aware of. Do we think those people are going to just sit at home doing nothing? I mean, I wouldn't blame them for taking a job on the black market if they're forced to sit around that long.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think after a year, being an asylum seeker, you can take some work. But no, that's going to be a fascinating interview, and I'm looking forward to seeing that on Talk, Isabel. Let's just take a look at what the Defence Minister, Luke Pollard, has been saying about this issue of military bases. He spoke to the BBC earlier today.
Absolutely right, though, when the Prime Minister set out his ambition to close every single asylum hotel, that every government department does what it can to step up and support that mission. So we're working with the Home Office at the moment to look at where we have disused military facilities that could be used to house asylum seekers as their applications are processed. We're in discussions around a number of sites at the moment. It's right that I think that the MOD steps up to support this mission at this time, because I don't want to see a single asylum hotel open. I imagine your viewers don't as well. We've already closed 24 of them in the last year, saving £1 billion to the taxpayer, but I want to see every single one of them closed.
Luke Pollard there, the Defence Minister. Let me just get back to Isabel in a second, but I want to bring you some breaking news, and that is that Hurricane Melissa has made landfall in Jamaica. Estimated winds of 185 miles an hour. Now, there are many British nationals, of course, who will be over there visiting friends and family or living there in Jamaica as well. This is a really, really serious incident, and of course, this is a powerful Category storm. A Category 5 storm has now made landfall in Jamaica with winds of 185 miles an hour. That's Hurricane Melissa. We'll bring you the latest on that, no doubt wreaking devastation in its wake. We'll bring you the latest on that, of course, between now and 7 o'clock if there's more to say. Just back to Isabel Oakeshott, our international editor now, because I want to talk about an associated story about migration. This is a story in The Sun about Spin, a charity bankrolled by the Home Office using taxpayer cash to teach school kids as young as 8 to see migration in a positive light. There's so many people who contact me in this station, Isabel, worried about what's being taught in our schools, what our children are being told, the woke agenda, the history of our country not being taught properly or fairly or accurately or from one perspective. And actually, this is branched into classrooms and nationwide schools programme to challenge the mindset of pupils as young as 8. Reform's Deputy Leader Richard Tice said the entire contract is a con and should be scrapped. Individuals can fund charities, but the taxpayer should not be propping up propaganda to British children in our primary schools. This is Migrant Help is the name of the charity. I think we probably know their view on these things. They offer free assemblies and workshops, including an exercise asking kids to imagine they have 5 minutes to leave their home. What is your thought on this, Isabel?
Well, my thought on this is if we're going to have this kind of stuff in our schools, you also need someone like me or one of our other talk contributors to go and give the opposite perspective. I don't actually think we should be asking 8-year-old children to make up their minds on such a highly sensitive political issue in all seriousness. You know, I'm not proposing that someone like me goes and talks to kids that age. But what this casts a spotlight on is the scale of left-wing propaganda in our education system. And this is something I have long had a bee in my bonnet about, because I've got 3 kids. They're not now, I don't have any kids in the UK education system, and part of it is because of this kind of thing. And I've seen it even in the best schools, perhaps particularly in the best independent schools. You've still got a left-leaning teaching profession that is absolutely not averse to criticising, teachers criticising, in particular, Reform UK, using casual language, you know, like far-right parties, and including Reform UK in that. We did a story on Talk, Kevin O'Sullivan and I, a couple of weeks ago. We obtained an undercover recording of a sixth form teacher in a state school talking about how she was going to go and join a Palestine Action protest. And our listeners will probably know that Palestine Action is proscribed. This stuff goes on right across the education system. It's not widely reported on because we can't expect our pupils, particularly not, you know, younger ones, junior school pupils, to report back to their parents about, you know, the precise comments that are being made in assemblies and by outside speakers. And I don't think we know the half of it. But what it is doing is it is shaping and influencing the politics of young people in an incredibly one-sided way. There's far too many schools raising money for charities like, you know, refugee action type charities, refugee welcome type charities. I'm not saying those charities don't have a place. What I'm saying is that if you're going to use school children to participate in that kind of thing, you need the other side of the story. And by the way, that's actually a legal responsibility on our teachers. They are not supposed to put one-sided political propaganda to our children, but they do.
Isabel, thank you. This is Isabel Oakeshott there, Talks International editor. A spokesman for Migrant Help said the aim of Migrant Help's schools programme is to engage with teachers and pupils across the UK to help encourage critical thinking and compassion while also empowering young minds. The workshops are educational, not political, and have received overwhelmingly positive feedback from teachers and students alike. Well, we know why the teachers praise them, because most teachers are tree-hugging lefties. Not all of them, but many of them. Lots to discuss on all of that. Derek is in Manchester. 0344 499 1000 is the number that he has called. Derek, your thoughts on the migrant accommodation story? It's great to talk to you this evening.
Oh, hi, Peter.
Hi,
yeah, to be quite honest, I'm absolutely sick and tired of listening to these idiotic politicians. I mean, they're now actually boasting about the fact that they're going to be putting these migrants into military accommodation as if it's something special. And it's not. All they're doing, they're putting them into things like married quarters where they're still free to roam the streets. And that's what people want stopping.
Do you agree, Derek, with... Sorry to interrupt you. Do you agree with Isabel's thought in all of this, Derek, that actually these should be secure sites and these migrants shouldn't be allowed out?
Yeah, that's what I was saying all along. I said that the other day on one of the programs.
Okay, yeah.
Mark Dolan. And the top of it is they broke into the country illegally. It is against the law. They should be locked up in a military camp, guarded by the troops that we've got supposed to be defending our borders. You know, I mean, what sort of common sense do they not understand, these people? These people have been to university. Have they been there to get stupid? You know, I mean, that's all I can say.
It's a fair point, Derek. Thank you. Let's speak to David in Southampton. David, I'm not sure we've spoken before. What would you like to say on this?
Yeah, hi. No, we haven't spoken before.
Great to talk to you. You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I listen to talkTV and watch it sort of throughout the day, so I dip in and out. But one of the things I haven't heard about, I'm ex-military, ex-Navy, and the accommodation that they're talking about housing everybody in, I haven't actually heard any figures on how much it's going to cost. If there's 30,000 illegal migrants, that's 30,000 mattresses, bedding, and then the kitchens to feed them and everything. I haven't heard a figure on that yet. Has anybody...
What we do know, David, is presumably it will be less expensive once you've had the initial outlay of £145 per person per night, which is that's the average cost of a migrant in a hotel.
Yeah.
So presumably it'll be less than that. And if there is a saving, is that something you'd be happy with?
Well, here's the point, though. The point is that we don't want to have these people in our country, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if the point is that we're not going to, at some point, be accepting illegal migrants, got nothing wrong with migrants who come over here and, want to be part of our country. I'm more than happy about that. But if then we've now got military accommodation that's been re-established, refurbished, and it's cost millions, billions, however much it would be, then what happens to that accommodation once we don't accept anybody else in the country?
Well, yeah, and it's a question of whether we ever get to that stage as well, David, because the processing of these people, if people come here claiming asylum, about 76% of asylum seekers get asylum granted to them. I think that's too high. I think the system is wrong, but nonetheless, about 76% of asylum seekers get that. So they come to this country illegally and then we accept them, which I don't think we should do at all. And the policy of both Reform UK and the Conservatives is now, anyway, if you come to this country illegally, you won't be here at all. You'll be immediately deported. So actually, the processing is still a massive problem, David.
Yeah, well, that appears to be the case. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. It just seems crazy that, these guys are turning up to our country. We don't know who they are. They've lobbed their passports into the water, and now they're in amongst us. I'm not even sure if there's something gospel. I think there might be something gospel. I did hear something about that. But, you see it on YouTube all the time with, big groups of them. And it's just not right. And I don't understand why they can't solve it. Why this government can't do it. Why the previous government couldn't do it. I get the whole thing. You have to have certain things in place. But
they had plenty of time to do that, though, didn't they? They had plenty of time to get things in place, David.
Well, I think they both have. I think all parties have. And I think, the Tories will probably turn around in future and come up with the same policies that Nigel Farage has done just to try and win public opinion back.
David, great to talk to you. Give me a ring anytime. That's David in Southampton. Jane says the Labour government had 14 years to come up with ideas how to deal with illegal migrants. Why are they still talking about how to do it 14 months in power? It's more like 16 months now, Jane, but your point stands. In fact, it's perhaps strengthened. Leslie says for the survival of this country, keep the Greens and Labour out. Reform and the Tories must come together. Another person says the Chancellor is scraping a saving of 1 or 2 billion from here, there, everywhere she can, yet all this money is flooding out. Lots to discuss in all of this. We'll talk about economics in a minute in regard to the Employment Rights Bill. Hannah Slaughter is going to join us from the Resolution Foundation. This is a really interesting one because you've got a Labour supporting grouping in the Resolution Foundation. In fact, its former head is now the Chancellor's sort of representative on earth, a man called Torsten Bell. He changed his name from Torsten Henriksen Bell to sound less posh. And the Resolution Foundation is talking about this and essentially disagreeing with the government. We'll talk to Hannah in just a second. Stay with us.
This Justice Secretary could not deport the only small boat migrant who who tried to be deported. Yes. Having been mistakenly released, Hadush Kabatu came back to prison asking to be deported, not once, not twice, but 5 times. But he was turned away. Calamity Lammy strikes again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We just had a statement from the Israelis, the embassy here in the UK, in regard to what is happening in the Middle East and the ceasefire. Footage documented on Monday says the Israeli embassy in London shows Hamas operatives removing human remains from a pre-prepared location, reburying them nearby, and staging a fabricated discovery for visiting International Committee of the Red Cross representatives. Moments after moving the bodies, Hamas terrorists summoned the Red Cross to the site and presented the staged scene as if a hostage had just been found. This deliberate deception, says the Israeli embassy in London, forms a broader and deeply disturbing pattern. Hamas is not searching for the bodies of the hostages, it is hiding them while performing for the cameras to create a false narrative of compliance and humanitarian concern. Hamas has repeatedly claimed that it faces difficulties locating the remains and lacks engineering equipment to do so. These claims are now exposed as false, say the Israelis. No engineering tools are required to transfer remains. The obstacle to the return of the deceased hostages is not equipment, it is Hamas's refusal to return them. The stage performance for the Red Cross is not a mere propaganda tactic, it is psychological warfare against the families of the hostages and an attempt to mislead the international community, including British public media and policy makers. Hamas continues to violate the ceasefire agreement by withholding the bodies of innocent victims who should be brought home for a dignified burial. It is using the murdered hostages as blackmail to continue its brutal campaign of regaining control of Gaza and buying time to withhold from progressing to stage 2 of the ceasefire agreement that will work to disarm the terrorist group. And finally, the Israelis say, we urge the media and the international community to recognise these actions for what they are, a cruel manipulation designed to distort the truth and obstruct the return of the deceased to their families. That is Israel, the Israeli embassy in London, putting out a statement reacting to what Hamas has been doing or not doing, and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, instructing his military to immediately carry out powerful attacks in Gaza. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. And of course, the ceasefire seems to be falling apart. I want to talk now about the economy and ministers who will apparently not row back on Labour's workers' rights overhaul before new laws come into force. This is businesses fearing they'll be betrayed by promises that changes could be at a later date. Really interesting that businesses and the left-leaning Resolution Foundation think tank are warning that the measure could stunt growth and have suggested a 6-month limit on measures in the Employment Rights Bill. Let's speak to Hannah Slaughter. She's senior economist at the Resolution Foundation. Hannah, I must start by apologising that yesterday we did want to get the Resolution Foundation on. Unfortunately, we had breaking news. Apologies to you and your organisation that we had to postpone this. Thank you for joining us today. Tell me what you think about this measure, what you think should happen, Hannah.
Sure. So, I mean, it's worth saying at the start, the Employment Rights Bill is a massive piece of legislation. There's a really wide range of measures in it, and lots of these measures will kind of improve job security, particularly for low-paid workers, and have a really positive impact. But there is one part of the bill where we do think that the government should carefully consider whether it's going too far, and that is in the area of unfair dismissal. So at the moment, if you're a worker, you're only entitled to protection against unfair dismissal after you've been in your job for 2 years. The government is planning on reducing that to basically day one, so you get that protection from the first day in your job. That's obviously, on the one hand, you could argue that's good for workers. They get these protections straight away. But the other side of the coin is that there is a trade-off there, and having that kind of immediate protection for workers and that's such a massive change from 2 years to day one. That could be that could put businesses off hiring, and that could then stymie growth.
It also, the whole way things work in this country would be changed by that, wouldn't they? Because usually what happens, not all the time, but usually what happens is most people have some sort of probation period where at any point they could be told in the first 3 months, 6 months, however long it is, actually it's not working, you've got to go. Or alternatively, actually it's going really well, let's reduce the probation period, or let's have the discussion after 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. Once people are often very different in a job interview. We all have the sort of job interview thing where we all sort of perform a bit, but actually working in a job, whether it's the right job for you or the right job for you and their employers, you can't decide that on day one, can you? You've got to see that it works. So I agree with you. Do you think the Labour government's going to listen to you?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned probationary periods, because that's exactly right. We would definitely argue that businesses, employers need some time to be able to actually gauge whether someone is the right fit for the job once they've actually started working there. We would argue that rather than that kind of that trial kind of period, if you like, 2 years is certainly too long, but actually reducing that down to day one it does go too far. We'd advocate for something more like 3 months or 6 months. That would be much more in line with international peers. The government has said that what it will do to kind of mitigate the kind of risks on the business side is introduce a kind of probationary period, maybe of around 9 months, and in that period, the businesses would still be, they'd still have to, prove that dismissals were fair if they were kind of taken to task by a worker, but the kind of the bar that they would have to meet would be lower, so there'd kind of be a bit of a sort of middle ground. We have argued that actually that's likely to be confusing for employers, and actually, just kind of making it straightforward, just kind of take the 2-year threshold that we already have and bringing that down to 6 months or 3 months would be a far more straightforward way of still protecting workers and keeping to the spirit of what the Labour Party promised in its manifesto before it came into government, but actually mitigate some of those risks on the business side too.
Your former head of the Resolution Foundation is a very influential Treasury Minister called Torsten Bell. He changed his name from Torsten Henriksen Bell to sound less posh. Have you been on the old Snapchat? Torsten, it's Hannah. Can you sort this out?
Well, to be totally clear, we are an independent think tank. We're not affiliated with any political party. We're very happy to kind of criticise governments of all parties, as well as support policy measures where we think that they that they're going to improve living standards. I think in this case, it's really clear when you look at the evidence and when you look at what are the international norms. Something in the vein of kind of 3 to 6 month unfair dismissal protections would be far more in line with international peers, and it would be far more kind of at the end of the day, we kind of want to balance protections for workers, but also without kind of getting rid of the flexibility in the UK labour market that means that we can kind of boost growth and boost employment, and that's kind of really where we're coming from when we're thinking, yes, bring down the kind of 2-year threshold, but going all the way to day one rights in this instance is likely to be going too far.
Question well dodged there, Hannah. A career in politics beckons. Tell me, Labour in their cabinet, not a single person has run a business. Do you believe that this government gets business, understands business, and understands the needs of business, especially when it comes to things like the national insurance rate being increased for workers, for businesses, for their contributions as well? Because there's so many people. Craig Beaumont of the Federation of Small Businesses said bosses are fearful of official backtracking once the measures were made law. We're entering the last chance legislative saloon, but ping pong, that's between obviously the Commons and the Lords, can of course take longer. Parliament's view must be heard and respected and not dismissed, but business's view needs to be heard as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I certainly hope that the government is listening to both kind of worker representatives and business representatives and trying to kind of gauge that balance. And it's certainly, it's worth bearing in mind that, this is a really big bill, which is great, in terms of worker protection, but it does also mean a lot of things coming down the track for businesses on top of kind of recent NICs rises, recent big rises in the minimum wage. So it's kind of worth, it's worth treading really carefully and kind of, looking at the evidence, making sure that we're not kind of, we want better protections for workers, but not at the expense of lots of job losses. And it's balancing those two things and really looking at kind of, going carefully, looking at the evidence and making sure that you're kind of treading the right line between that trade-off of protection versus flexibility.
Hannah, thank you. Hannah Slaughter there, Senior Economist at the Resolution Foundation. What do you think of this? What should a probation period be? Maybe you run a small business yourself, actually, and maybe you're looking at this employment rights bill thinking, hold on a second here, what about our rights as employers? We want to build a business, we want to employ people when we can. Yeah, we want to treat them fairly, we don't want to exploit them, but actually, can business take much more? If you're saying that, I mean, I've heard of so many businesses already who are saying we can't take on more people because even employing them with the insurance, national insurance contributions and all the legislation and all the red tape just makes it very, very difficult. I spoke actually a few months ago to someone who runs hairdressers, and what usually happens, about 15 hairdressers in there, I think maybe 2 salons, and she said, look, we have an apprentice every year, and usually, someone leaves or there's a bit of turnover or someone goes part-time or 2 people go part-time, and we can usually say to the apprentice at the end of it, we've got a job for you. And she said, we just can't do that anymore. Just the government's just made that impossible. And it's not big things, it's those little things. It's those, the small businesses, the people who stand on their feet all day, the backbone of this country, the security guards, the waiters and waitresses, the hairdressers, the plumbers, the plasterers, the labourers. Those are the people in small businesses, micro businesses, sometimes people working for themselves or working with, 3 or 4 other people. Those are the ones that have exactly the same challenges or very similar challenges to huge businesses that employ thousands of people and have huge divisions to deal with all this stuff as well. There's loads to discuss in all of this, and we're going to talk as well about an arguably less important matter, which is that Jeremy Corbyn is to play the Wizard of Oz in the pantomime. Oh yes, we are, after the break.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Someone just messaged me on Twitter saying, why are you not talking about the stabbing in Uxbridge? We are talking about that a bit later on. We're going to talk about what's in the Sun, and that's one of their main stories, knifed while walking the dog, about the 49-year-old man who has died and 2 others injured following a stabbing in Uxbridge on Monday afternoon. We will be talking about that later in the programme, so fear not. Thank you to Nat, who is in Tel Aviv and watching the programme, who says Hamas terrorists have been crossing the yellow line, shooting at our soldiers, desecrating the bodies of our hostages, fabricating discovery of the bodies of our hostages, etc., with Donald Trump throwing seemingly empty threats at them. But it's Israel that's about to violate the ceasefire. I don't think so. Great show as always, and a gorgeous head of hair, apparently, so I got my hair cut. Thank you to the person who says the Employment Rights Bill is totally loaded for employment agencies, where you can have a temp in, and if they don't fit in, you can send them back. But on the downside, this costs the employer 50% more in commission, and you can't take the contract for at least 3 months. We are a 36-person small manufacturing company and have no plans to take on any more staff. Employment costs on £8,000 a month energy bill are screwing us, Peter. This is the most anti-manufacturing government I've known in my 40 years in manufacturing. As an employer, I have to say, I wonder why I bother. Ollie says more government incompetence. The contract should have had early termination clauses, but of course they don't bother to do anything properly because they're spending other people's money, the taxpayers' money. And just on inflation, on food inflation and so on, one person called the Prof has been in touch and says, I could feel my heckles rising. £4.95 for a can of deodorant. Food inflation is far more than 4% in the past week, never mind the year. £4.95 for a can of deodorant. That is absolutely ridiculous. That has certainly raised a stink with me, let me tell you. And I do remember the words of a very famous and indeed celebrated international correspondent who's done lots of daring do across the world, the Middle East and so on, who once told me a really, really profound thing, which was that no man over 30 who is self-respecting can use links. Right then, let's talk about Jeremy Corbyn. He is going to play the Wizard of Oz in a pantomime, and Alex Farrell, who is a talk reporter and expert on pantomimes, is here. Oh yes, he is. Alex, what do you make of this?
This wasn't on my bingo card this morning, Peter, when I woke up. Jeremy Corbyn, where's his career? It's behind him, apparently.
So you did that?
It's now in panto. Thank you. Yeah, it's a bit of an odd move, I think, by the former Labour Party leader. He's joined as the Wizard of Oslington in a Wicked-inspired production, apparently, this winter in, of course, North London, called Wicked Witches. But interestingly, it's not actually in his constituency. It's on the board of his constituency in Islington North with his colleague, former colleague, Emily Thornberry. So perhaps next year they could appear together as the Ugly Sisters.
You never know. You never know. I mean, that is dreadful misogyny against Emily Thornberry, but nonetheless, very funny. And that's the main thing. Maybe, Ugly Sisters. Maybe one of them could be Widow Twankey. I mean, what do you think he'll bring to the role, Alex?
Well, clearly, a lot of experience in the House of Commons has lined him up for this pantomime performance, Peter. It's very much like a pantomime in there half the time. I think it's going to be an interesting one because there's going to be 2 pantomimes. There's going to be one for children, which I'm sure will be nice, clean, family fun. And then they can have an adult version.
Oh, I hate those. I can't stand those. Sorry. No, those are dreadful. So Jeremy Corbyn's going to be in that as well?
He's going to be in that one, which apparently is sexually explicit and is bursting with festive filth, which isn't what you want to hear in the same conversation as Jeremy Corbyn, is it?
That's very, very strange. Why is he doing this?
I don't know. I presume it's not for the money. I don't know whether they are paying him. That's not been revealed. But it is a long old run, actually. It's from the 18th of November to the 31st of December.
But is he actually in it?
It's a cameo appearance.
But it's a cameo appearance, but is he appearing every night, or is he on screen or something, or is he actually in it?
Apparently he's in it as a cameo. But I don't know if it is on screen or whether every night. Because if it was every night, that's putting a proper shift in. Pantomime's quite difficult.
Quite a commitment. You've been in pantomimes yourself, Alex, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been in 18 pantomimes in my life. I know I don't look old enough.
You've been in 18 pantomimes. Which characters have you played, Alex?
Widow Twankey, Nurse Nancy, Buttons back in the day when I was a lot more younger and more handsome, Peter. But now I just play the old women.
I was in a pantomime as well, actually. Believe it or not.
Oh no, you weren't.
Yeah, oh yes, I was. I was a bubble in Aladdin, and a bubble, yeah. So we sang "I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles," and I had a sort of Purcell Purcell sort of cardboard thing stuck to my chest and a little beret on. All photographic evidence has been destroyed in a terrible, terrible fire, which is me literally burning them, which I had created. But yes, I was as a child in a pantomime. So
if you didn't get burst.
Well, no. Thankfully, I think my career was short-lived as a pantomime actor. It wasn't really for me, but certainly creeping the boards in my youth was something I did. How will people react to this, Alex, do you think? Will they see it as a bit of fun, or will they just say, hold on a second, what on earth are you doing? Although, Nigel Farage went and I'm a celebrity, there are loads of different politicians. What about other politicians who could be in pantomime? Maybe Angela Rayner as Widow Twankey?
Yeah, well, it's clearly good publicity for the actual show itself. I mean, there are politicians in the past that have been in pantomime. So Anne Widdecombe, she played Widdy in Waiting, apparently, in Snow White a few years ago. Edwina Curry, she's been in a pantomime as well. I think we could probably get former MP Sir Michael Fabricant in a pantomime. I'm sure he'd love to play the Panto Dame.
Yes.
But yeah, I think politicians aren't taken seriously at the best of times. So just stick them all in a pantomime. In fact, just close the House of Commons at Christmas, put in a few dames and buttons, and just let's see what happens.
Yes, certainly, and Emily Thornberry actually is a dame, so she wouldn't even have to change her name. Alex,
exactly.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated there. Every time I hear Snow White, I always think of Mae West. He had one of the greatest lines ever, which was, "I used to be Snow White, but I drifted." We're going to talk about the sports in a minute or two, but what do you think, and which politicians would you like to be in a pantomime? What characters should they play, and why? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Stay with us.
This Justice Secretary could not deport the only small boat migrant who who tried to be deported. Yes. Having been mistakenly released, Hadush Kabatu came back to prison, asking to be deported, not once, not twice, but 5 times. But he was turned away. Calamity Lammy strikes again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks to everybody who's been in touch about Jeremy Corbyn in the pantomime. Graham and Bushy says, has Corbyn's party changed its name from Your Party to Your Panto? To the best of my knowledge, Graham, oh no, it hasn't. Bob in Surrey says the House of Commons is a pantomime, which is a fair point. Let's go away from pantomime and politics and instead to the world of sport.
Sports news from The Sun.
Sean Custis is with us again, the head of sport at The Sun. Sean, thanks for seeing us this evening. It's a big week of Carabao Cup action. Just take us through the 3 matches tonight.
It is, well, it's sort of the hors d'oeuvre tonight. Main courses are tomorrow night, but Grimsby are playing tonight. Now, ordinarily, say Grimsby, big deal, but of course they're the story of the Carabao Cup so far. They knocked Manchester United out at a time when Man United were really rock bottom, but still it was an amazing night, won on penalties, and they're playing Brentford. And it was actually David Ortell, the manager, was saying Brentford's going to be harder than Man United because Brentford are not a team that's in decline. Man United were at the time and struggling. So Grimsby at home to Brentford, that's going to be a really hard test for them. Wickham against Fulham, you would expect Fulham to win that one. And it's Wrexham Cardiff, a good old Welsh tear-up expected there. How strong each team is of any of the 3 games is always difficult to tell because a lot of them, even the Premier League teams at this time of the season, sort of tend to play the reserves even up to this particular point. Maybe when you get down to the last 8 they don't. I would expect Grimsby though to play their full team. Whether Brentford will, I'm not so sure. And then we've had a lot of managers today talking about the games tomorrow night. So
five matches tomorrow night.
5 matches tomorrow night. No, they're involving a lot bigger teams. Mikel Arteta's been talking today not just about the Carabao Cup. They host Brighton tomorrow, but also about Arsenal's chances of finally winning the Premier League as well. And he's saying it's time to believe that they can do it, which is hostage to fortune there, don't you think? Arne Slot, interesting, of Liverpool, he dodged it. He didn't do one today. You're not contractually obliged to do a press conference in the Carabao Cup like you are in the Premier League. So Slot's decided after 4 Premier League defeats in a row, it's probably not a good idea.
Perhaps talking to the media isn't something he wants to do.
Not something he wants to do.
Hard to believe.
As he's got the option to duck out of it, he has. Quite often in this case, though, they put their assistant manager or coach up to do it instead, but he didn't even risk that today. He didn't want anybody talking about their current crisis. Guardiola was up talking for Man City. They play Swansea tomorrow night. He's he was actually talking about how a lot of teams have gone back to the long ball game, whereas he still likes to pass it around. And he's saying that the game has changed, gone back to some of the old traditions. Wolves play Chelsea tomorrow night. Chelsea not in a great state form. They're fluctuating a little bit at the moment. Of course, we know Wolves are rock bottom. Didn't see much from their manager either today. And it's Newcastle v Spurs, and you'll be well aware that it's my team Newcastle who are the holders of the Carabao Cup.
Of course.
Tomorrow night. And Eddie Howe was talking today about how he wants to continue on that fine tradition of us being cup winners, having got won one in 70 years. It's time to get a second one.
Good luck to the Toon Army. Big developments at Celtic last night. Brendan Rodgers is gone. What's next for the Glasgow club?
Well, when we were sitting here this time last night, this was not on the cards at all. No hints, nothing. Then 9:15 last night. Whoa, look at that. Brendan Rodgers has resigned. And of course, well known to English football fans for his time, Leicester.
Yep.
And Liverpool, of course. He was a Liverpool manager at one point too. Will he be coming back to the Premier League? Time will tell. Maybe not just right now. Meanwhile, at Celtic, Martin O'Neill, who was actually in this building yesterday morning, working on Talk Sport.
Yeah, no, I met him one day. Actually, I got my photo taken with him because obviously he's a total hero in Northern Ireland.
He was?
Yes, I know. It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, I know he was Northern Ireland manager. I also knew he played for Northern Ireland. He was a bit of a total hero.
And he was And he was here yesterday morning talking about how Hearts, who are top of the league, look like they've got a great chance of winning the league.
Right.
By that afternoon, he was off to
Hearts
Glasgow.
are rubbish. It's all about Celtic.
To take over Celtic. Now, it caught a lot of people by surprise. And not only that caught by surprise, the way Dermot Desmond went for Brendan Rodgers afterwards and really tore into him, calling him a divisive character, and caused them a lot of pain. I mean, this is somebody who it was like his best mate, you know. I mean, he's been at Celtic twice, Rodgers, and they were seen as an inseparable double act. But there had been a few rumblings that they weren't getting on so well. Not a rumbling enough to think that Rodgers was going to leave, but it's happened now. O'Neill's there. O'Neill has stressed today that it's very much sees it as an interim appointment. He doesn't expect to be necessarily manager even in 2 weeks' time. There has been a bit of talk about Ange Postecoglou going back to the club. Obviously, he's without. Yeah, that would be his third club in 6 months. Right. But there doesn't seem to have been an approach in that direction. There's a little bit of money going in Kieran McKenna at Ipswich. He's known to admire Celtic as a club. He's got a release clause probably around £5 million, but again, doesn't seem to be an approach just yet. Maybe they're just biding their time for a couple of days, because I think that spat yesterday really did come as a bit of a surprise at that time of night. So maybe they haven't had time to get their thoughts together at Celtic yet about who should be the new manager. But they certainly moved quick enough to get Martin O'Neill up the road.
Snapped him
and
up.
It's gone down pretty well with Celtic fans for now. Yeah. And who knows? You never know with Martin. You know, he wins a game, then he wins another one. He thinks, quite like the taste of this. So you can't be sure. But at 73 years old, you wouldn't think he's one for the longevity there.
Yeah, well, he's done very well throughout his whole career. Yes. And I can't believe you question my knowledge of football. It's almost as if you think I don't
slightly stunned me.
Do you remember Raquel in Coronation Street? The character Raquel. Yes. Yeah, Sarah Lancashire played her.
I do.
She had one of the greatest lines ever about football. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Raquel. I think she said to Ken Barlow, she said, I don't really understand football. I mean, they played at different ends. I mean, if everyone just played in one direction, they could score as many goals as they liked.
Wise words.
From
I'm sure you admire that sort of thinking.
Indeed, yes. Just don't call me a dumb blonde. Thank you very much, Sean Custis, Head of Sport at The Sun. We will talk more about the sport tomorrow, of course, and we're going to talk quite a lot, actually, about pantomimes, because there are lots and lots of people who have been in touch. Rachel Reeves could play the part of Fagin. She's got to pick a pocket or two. Pete says Keir Starmer could play Pinocchio, as he keeps telling lies. Also says David Lammy could play the village idiot or a brainless scarecrow at the Yellow Brick Road. Brendan Rodgers has also managed Watford, as Sean would know, says Trevor. Ken the Asda driver, Corbyn should be renamed the Wizard of Dross, which is an interesting point as well. So thank you very much indeed for all of those. Also, there are quite a few people getting in touch on rape gangs as well, and what people are talking about there. We'll take a few calls on that, I'm sure. Also on taxation, Jenny and Bister says taking out the three main taxes opened the doors to tax everything else by saying, well, we are doing this because we are protecting the main three, but of course by the end of this Parliament they will tax those two. Jenny, I think that's a really interesting point, and I do think that Rachel Reeves will believe herself that she has no option but to put up income tax, which ironically, if you are going to put up taxes, I don't think they should. I think we're taxed to the hilt in this country. The taxation in this country is the highest level of tax that it has been as a proportion of what the country makes since the Second World War. I think there's so many people absolutely struggling with the cost of living, even people who have decent salaries struggling with the cost of living. But the fairest way of doing it would not be picking at all these little bits and pieces, but actually putting up income tax. I've spoken to a number of economists about that over the last few months who said putting up income tax would be the fairest way. I don't want income tax to go up. I'm just going to be really, really clear here. I do not want it to go up. I don't want it to go up for me. I don't want it to go up for you. And I think the government just needs to think public spending, borrowing, we need to sort it out, or maybe even get some growth. Maybe understand the economics of small businesses, which make up the vast majority of businesses in this country. The vast majority of people who are employed in the private sector are employed in small businesses. So why don't we understand them? Why don't we try at least to get some way in which we can help them? Let's speak about the mansion tax as well. Jess in Kent has some views on this. Jess, just a couple of minutes before the news, but what would you like to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that with the amount of money that we're spending on these migrant hotels, etc., which I know is a whole big thing, but that would plug half the supposed black hole with what we're spending. It would plug that hole. And from that point of view, we'd be paying less in interest, debt interest, and actually we could then look at growing the
economy. Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's not just migration, but actually, believe it or not, 44% of the whole economy is government spending. 44%. I mean, that is huge. That is a huge level of government spending. And they keep saying, oh, GDP is going up. Yeah, but there are loads more people in the country as well. You've got to look at GDP, at what the country makes per person here as well, Jess. I just don't think we're being given the full story here.
I don't think we are, but also the actual, when you look at the private sector, the productivity of the private sector is double what it is of the public sector and civil service. Their productivity is so poor because they never get sacked.
Yeah, it's very true.
They've got gold-plated pensions which we cannot afford. It is a two-tier system in terms of, if they started actually, and I appreciate the news is coming up, but if they actually used, the government actually treated the country as a private company.
Yeah.
And realised that money was money, not just monopoly money.
Yeah.
I
mean, tax is real money that has to be earned and is then paid by people like you and me, Jess. Listen, thanks for your call. Really sensible thoughts there. Really appreciate it, Jess. That's Jess in Kent there. Thank you to her for that. We'll take far more calls between now and 7. I'll try and get more people on. Do use the news break to get your call in. Give us a ring, 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about immigration with the former immigration minister. Also, Prunella Scales, the Fawlty Towers actress. She has died aged 93. Plenty to discuss between now and 7.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
thank you so much for your company on Talk. It's just gone 6 o'clock. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Loads to talk about in regard to migration. Very sad news that Prunella Scales, who was, of course, Sybil in Fawlty Towers, she has died. Very sad. We'll talk to Mike Ward, TV critic at the Express and Star, a little bit later on. Also find out what is in the Sun newspaper tomorrow. They'll be covering that horrible story, knifed while walking the dog. The 49-year-old man has died. 2 others injured following a stabbing in Uxbridge on Monday afternoon. We'll talk to John Lucas about that. We'll talk about so many things, and indeed what you want to talk about between now and 7 o'clock. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 722 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note 0344 499 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on that main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us. Some breaking news into the Talk newsroom, and that is a child has died after a hazardous material incident. This is in East London. Crews attending a property in Newham after 2 adults and 2 children went to hospital complaining about the smell of chemicals in a flat. That's according to the London Fire Brigade. One of the children later died in hospital. The Metropolitan Police investigating. Around 12 people evacuated from surrounding properties as a precaution while crews are responding. Specially trained firefighters carrying out a systematic sweep of the affected property, working to detect any hazardous materials present and ventilate the scene, according to the London Fire Brigade. And in a statement it said the first call reporting the incident was received at 1:18 p.m. Firefighters from Poplar, Millwall, Euston and the surrounding fire stations attended the scene. The incident was over for crews by 4:23 p.m. If we get any update on that, we will of course bring it to you. But I want to just return to our main story now. This is about asylum seekers who are going to be housed in military sites instead of hotels. Let's take a look at what the Defence Minister, Luke Pollard, told the BBC about this, about his department, the Ministry of Defence, stepping up to help the Home Office close these asylum hotels.
It's absolutely right that when the Prime Minister set out his ambition to close every single asylum hotel, that every government department does what it can to step up and support that mission. So we're working with the Home Office at the moment to look at where we have disused military facilities that could be used to house asylum seekers as their applications are processed. We're in discussions around a number of sites at the moment. It's right that I think that the MOD steps up to support this mission at this time, because I don't want to see a single asylum hotel open. I imagine your viewers don't as well. We've already closed 24 of them in the last year, saving £1 billion to the taxpayer, but I want to see every single one of them closed.
Well, that was Luke Pollard there, the Defence Minister. Let's talk to Kevin Foster, former Immigration Minister for the Conservatives. Kevin, thank you for joining me this evening. Great to have you on the programme. Just to say, I just wonder what you think about this. Is this a good scheme? Is this a good idea to do? Is this something that you think will work, Kevin? I'm not sure Kevin can hear me. I think that's a bit of a problem. We'll try and get him back on the line anyway. Luke Pollard, of course, there talking about this scheme and whether these different areas, these different military installations and different military bases will be working. So, Kevin Foster, I think you can hear me now, Kevin?
I can now hear you. Apologies about that, Peter.
That's all right. That's all right. These things sometimes go wrong when you're dealing with technology. Tell me your thoughts on the fact that these military bases are going to be used to house migrants. Is that a good idea? Is that something you considered when you were Immigration Minister? And why hasn't it been done before?
It was something we considered whilst we were in government. We were quite open about that. I have to say, though, the Crowborough Barracks is a site we actually rejected. We didn't think it was suitable for this type of use, but we did look at...
Why did you reject Crowborough? Why was it something you didn't think was right?
Yeah, we looked up. Literally, the site was looked at. The buildings there didn't strike us as particularly suitable. There's lots of smaller buildings there. It's a relatively small site in the sense of what we're looking at. Okay, it's a big number of people here, 600. If you consider a Greek-style centre, you're talking in the higher to low, in the thousands as being more useful. Plus its location, we wasn't particularly close to infrastructure that we could use then to remove people if we're able to. So we did actually reject Crowborough, but people may recall discussions around places like Scampton, Linton on Ouse, and of course in Mr Sunak's time there's also discussion around Catterick.
As an idea, is it something that you think will work?
Look, I think it's something that's part of a balanced approach towards dealing with the boats and the issues. You know, there are a need to find accommodation solutions, and we looked at Greece in particular, which has had quite a lot of success. And let's remember, by the way, in the US at the moment, you know, Donald Trump is also creating accommodation centres in terms of the issues they have as well, where people are taken into it, they are processed. Actually, they're there whilst the decision is done in the Greek model. And with people being together in one facility, one accommodation centre, it makes it easier to find people, to provide services, have interview rooms, all the sorts of things you might expect to speed up processing. And of course, if you've actually got people there, when you actually decide to say no, it's then much easier to start then identifying them, finding them, and then moving to remove them out of the country. It's one of the reasons actually we also looked at former air bases, because they also have runways which would potentially give some options in terms of direct removal flights from those centres, which would save things like journeys to nearby airports and some of the opportunities for protests that brings.
Kevin, what about the economics of this? Because we know that it would be something like, or it costs today, something like £145 per migrant per hotel place, never mind a room necessarily. Obviously more than one migrant could be in a room. So this is a very costly system at the moment. Presumably, if you're going to use a former airbase, or if you're going to use a military accommodation, that's going to cost a huge amount less. But will they have to be done up? Will they have to be brought up to a basic standard necessarily? From your looking at this when you were Immigration Minister, are these places ready to accept people tomorrow kind of thing? Because it's really interesting that Keir Starmer is talking about this migrant hotels closing perhaps in a year's time. From your perspective, is that realistic? Do the economics work, or is that pie in the sky?
Well, if the arrivals continue as they are currently, then it's completely unrealistic. You know, we're approaching, probably 40,000 arrivals will take place this year. If that rate carries on, and there was, I think back in June, when the most recent stats, there were 32,000 people in asylum hotels, and these announcements today provide accommodation for 900 people. So, you know, anyone can quickly do their sums and work out that accommodation in the hundreds isn't going to deal with arrivals in the tens of thousands. So, but it's the economics there. Actually, these are unlikely to save you a huge amount of money in themselves per night in comparison to a hotel. But what it's part of is making a difference and actually starting to speed up your process, but also not being so generous when people arrive. And a lot of people do question, why on earth do people have to end up in hotels? Why can't we have more basic accommodation? And the costs per site will depend on the condition each site's in. You know, I always took a view that if it was good enough for someone aged 18 to 40 in our armed forces, then it was more than good enough for someone aged 18 to 40 who was a small boat migrant, despite, it has to be said, the criticism I used to get from the Labour Party on those points around Napier Barracks.
How the worm has turned.
Oh, this is probably the latest immigration U-turn, and if other people are following it, this is something Nigel Farage was calling for earlier this year, and it's something else the Labour Party now are doing. And I suspect we're going to see even bigger U-turns next year if the things continue as they are.
Well, and you mentioned the people coming across. You mentioned the people coming across the channel. The latest figure: 36,736 people have crossed the channel on small boats this year. I wonder if you could answer a question from Pat, or a point really from Pat, who has messaged this in. You can send them in 0344 499 1000. She says, regarding the illegal migrants being put into army barracks, this will not save any money because the government will still have to fulfil their 5-year contracts. When is this government going to get a backbone and sort the boats coming here in the first place? I mean, given the contracts that have been signed, does that point stand from Pat, do you think, Kevin, or could we get out of those contracts? Because we've already seen this week a big and damning report yesterday from the Home Affairs Select Committee in Parliament saying that it's a shambles, trying to claw money back from providers, that taxpayers' money is going awry in the Home Office. Just give me your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think Pat must be referring to the framework contracts for suppliers of asylum accommodation. They actually are framework contracts because they flex depending on what the demand is. And things like hotels and large accommodation centres just be viewed as contingency accommodation, i.e. accommodation you use when you have more people than you have places like HIMOs to be rented. And I think, Peter, one of the things we also have to remember in this discussion is just shifting people out of asylum hotels into rented accommodation could put huge pressures on the rental market, which is already struggling.
When you said HIMOs there, did you mean HMOs, homes of multiple occupancy?
Yeah, homes in multiple occupancy.
Okay,
Generally, we're talking single men aged between 18 and 40. The sort of place you would be accommodating them under the Home Office contracts would be sort of a room in a house in multiple occupation. If you're not accommodating. This is where, though, again, the issue for large accommodation centres comes, is providing an alternative to actually that being where more people end up. But ultimately, this is an accommodation solution. What you have to look at is what you need to do to actually stop people coming over. You need to reduce the incentives to do so. You need to process people quickly when they get here. Large accommodation centres in the Greek experience can help you do that, and then move to remove people from this country. And of course, that's where a lot of the issues come, probably particularly for the Labour Party, around things like the European Court of Human Rights and which countries we're prepared to return people to. Germany's recently returned convicted criminals to Afghanistan, and there's pressure growing across Europe that they'll start taking people who are just immigration removals back to Afghanistan. Is that something the UK should be doing as well? And many of us would say, well, yes, it is.
Yeah, exactly. And if other countries in Western Europe are doing it, why can't we do it too? Kevin, thank you. That's Kevin Foster there, former Immigration Minister. Appreciate you joining me on the programme today. Thank you to Mark, who says, I love the news about the sites for asylum seekers. I want them. The Ministry of Defence to be handed the money that was going to the hotels after this crisis is over. I expect bases for our troops to be of a much higher standard. Let's speak to Ken in South Durham. Ken's given me a ring at 0344 499 1000. You can too between now and 7 o'clock. Ken, what is your take on this? Thanks for the call.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm retired now. I'm ex-forces, ex-army. What I'd like to know is, who's going to be guarding these bases?
Well, I'm not sure anybody is, because at the moment when they're in asylum accommodation, they can come and go as they please. So I'm not sure if you're on a base or a former base that there's actually going to be any security, because the people can come and go as they please. It's not as if they're secure or like prison camps or anything like that.
Well, even at the hotels, they've got, or supposed to have, SIA licensed holders.
Yeah, but not keeping people in. Not saying to people you can't go out to the shops.
I'm not saying keeping people in.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, why have they got SIA licensed holders on the hotels?
Well, I suppose, they would argue, I suppose, that there are many people who want to go into those hotels and attack migrants, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it could be the same with the army bases then.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, have you fears if these are adjacent to army bases or part of army bases that our troops could be under threat, or that there could be a threat to the migrants because of the position they're in?
No, I think they're actually saying disused army bases.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't think there's going to be any military or any military equipment on the actual bases. But who's going to be looking after them?
Yeah, it's a very fair point.
And in that case, who's going to be looking after us?
Yeah, Ken, I think you raised some good points there. It doesn't sound like a South Durham accent to me, Ken. Did you move house at one point?
Yeah, I moved from Bristol about 12 years ago.
I thought there was a tiny bit of West Country in there. Ken, thank you very much indeed for your call. That's Ken in South Durham there. What do you think of all of this? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk in just a second about Prunella Scales. Sybil in Fawlty Towers was her most famous role, of course, but she was known for many, many other things, including the very sad dementia that she had, and she was married to Timothy West as well, and that was just an incredible and very strong sort of showbiz marriage. They did numerous series together where they talked about the issues that she was facing and so on. Really, really interesting person. And Mike Ward is the TV critic of the Daily Express and Daily Star, is going to be joining us in just a second to discuss this. Send in your memories of Prunella Scales as well. I don't know about you, but I mean, obviously well, it's not obvious, but I am too young for Fawlty Towers the first time round, and I remember just watching it when I was about 12 or 13. They played all of them on TV again, and I mean, she was just such a brilliant character. There aren't any bad characters in Fawlty Towers, it must be said. They're all good characters, they're all funny characters, and she was an incredibly gifted actress. So we'll talk about her, Prunella Scales. She's died at the age of 93 in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
Violence went up in our prisons. Self-harm went up in our prisons. Drug abuse went up in our prisons. And prison officer numbers were cut under his watch. William Fernandez was released in error in March 2021. He was a sexual predator. He raped a 16-year-old and sexually assaulted another young woman after he was let out by prison in 2021. Was there an independent investigation? No.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has been in touch. I really appreciate your messages. We'll come to more of them, of course, between now and 7. You can get your call in as well, 0344 499 1000. Alex has tweeted me to say, if asylum seekers have entered this country illegally, why are they being allowed to apply to stay here? They should be deported immediately if they come here illegally. Well, Alex, that is certainly the policy of both Reform UK and the Conservatives, that if you come here illegally, you can't stay no matter what the case is. So we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, between now and 7 o'clock. We're going to find out what's in the Sun in a minute, more on Fergie and Andrew's new homes, and of course that awful, awful stabbing in Uxbridge in London on Monday afternoon. 49-year-old man has died, 2 others injured, and we will talk about that with John Lucas, who'll be here in a minute or two. A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. Police have confirmed he is an Afghan national. Right then, let's talk about Prunella Scales. The Fawlty Towers actress has died aged 93, her family is confirmed. She's best known for playing Sybil Fawlty, of course, the long-suffering and domineering wife of Basil Fawlty. He was played by John Cleese, of course, in the classic British sitcom. She died peacefully at home in London yesterday, according to her son Samuel, and Joseph Samuel West himself, a really, really good actor, and his dad, of course, Timothy West. They added she was watching Fawlty Towers the day before she died. John Cleese paid tribute, describing Prunella Scales as a really wonderful comic actress. He said, scene after scene, she was absolutely perfect. She was diagnosed with vascular dementia in 2013. The family said, our darling mother Prunella Scales died peacefully at home in London yesterday. She was 93. Although dementia forced her retirement from a remarkable acting career of nearly 70 years, she continued to live at home. And Timothy West, of course, died in November last year. The statement said, we would like to thank all of those who gave Prue such wonderful care at the end of her life. Her last days were comfortable, contented and surrounded by love. John Cleese said in the statement, a very sad. Prue was a really wonderful comic actress. I've recently been watching a number of clips of Fawlty Towers while researching a book. Scene after scene, she was absolutely perfect. She was a very sweet lady who spent a lot of her life apologising. I had a teaser about it. I was very, very fond of her. Well, I was too, certainly as an actress, seeing her on screen. Really brilliant comic actress. Mike Ward is the TV critic of the Daily Express and Daily Star. We've lost a star, haven't we, Mike?
Yeah, and as you say, she was associated so much with that character. It's interesting, I was just checking that it's 50 years ago, almost to the day, since the classic Fawlty Towers episode, The Germans, was shown on
Don't mention
TV
the war.
for the first time. Don't mention the war. Exactly. And arguably, that's the one that people remember more than any. And I have to say, I am old enough to remember it the first time around. And it's still, we're talking 50 years on, it's my favourite sitcom by far.
It is still brilliant. It is still very, very funny. Let's just remind ourselves of the great Prunella Scales.
Hello? Audrey, any news? Oh dear, he hasn't. Oh, I know.
She was very, very good on those phone calls where she would say, oh, I know. That was sort of almost a catchphrase, wasn't it? And you could see
Absolutely
in that clip, or for those who were listening, you could, I'll describe to them, I mean, obviously, John Cleese as Basil Fawlty getting more and more frustrated with his wife. And that comic pairing was a really strong one. Somewhat ironically, actually.
Well, yes, exactly.
He was married to John Cleese at the time was married to Connie Booth, who was Polly. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other irony that I was going to point out is that the marriage of Prunella and Timothy West was the most loving, caring marriage, and obviously after a dementia diagnosis in 2013 in particular, and she carried on working, and they made this wonderful Canal Journeys series together, several series of that, which was praised. The Alzheimer's Society would talk about her being an inspiration because they adjusted to her circumstances and they learned to live in the moment. They pointed out how being on a canal was the ultimate opportunity to do that. You're just there and you're present, and it was such a positive way to talk about that thing. To I know it's a cliche to raise awareness, but that's what it did, and it talked about things that affect so many people's lives in a way that made them see there are still ways of living with hope.
Totally, and I mean that was obviously in the latter years of her career. Tell us the stuff we don't know actually about Prunella Scales. We know about that. We know about the dementia. We know about those really amazing series she did with Timothy West. We know about Fawlty Towers, and we've talked about both those things. What else did she do? Because she'll be remembered, of course, for the big things. But what were the other things?
Well, she famously portrayed not one but two queens. She portrayed Queen Elizabeth II in the early 90s in an Alan Bennett stage show, and then for 30, I hadn't realised this because I was looking into it, 30 years or so, on and off, she played Queen Victoria on a one-woman show called An Evening with Queen Victoria. And you could just see that, can't you? You can see in the way she portrays, Sybil, that she has a certain majesty to her that you could translate into different roles and really playing on her acting strengths.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I'm now reminded. I think I need to go back and watch Fawlty Towers again, actually. I mean, there were so many. Even just, I mean, she could deliver a rebuke with one word when she rebuked John Cleese's character simply by saying Basil really, really rapidly, and he would immediately stop what he was doing. And he was such such an incredible actor. I mean, his sort of lanky rebukes, his sort of lanky kind of reactions to her rebukes was pretty incredible.
His physicality and her, as you say, that's her withering glances. You know, he was terrified of her, hilariously terrified. You know, when he had Mr. O'Reilly and to botch up the cowboy builder who botched up the building work, and his fear, because he wanted to do everything on the cheap, his fear of her reaction when she found out, living in terror of her the whole time. But yeah, as you say, she did it in such a way that it didn't really need to be exaggerated. A lot of actors, I think, would have exaggerated those performances, but she did it in such a way it was understated. It used sort of economy, I guess you would say was the expression, to put that comedy across.
It's really interesting you mentioned the Alan Bennett 1991 televised play A Question of Attribution. I remember that. Watching that, maybe not at the time, but at one stage. I mean, it was really, really brilliant. And the best thing is that while she has such a familiar face, like the best actors and actresses, you don't think of them as them. You don't think, oh, this is the woman who played Sybil. She just inhabited that role.
Yeah, that's to me, that is always the art. And it doesn't necessarily involve, I mean, obviously in the case of playing the Queen, it does, but it doesn't necessarily require a magnificently bold transformation physically or vocally. There's just something about how you inhabit a role, and sometimes in very subtle ways, that within minutes, the person watching just stops thinking of that previous character and just buys into what exactly they're projecting there, which is a great skill.
Yeah, I think of someone like David Jason, who, you never watched A Touch of Frost and thought, oh, that's Del Boy. He was two really long-running, important roles, but they were so different. She was could also be a very serious actress, not just as various queens, for example, but also in really, really heavy drama like Long Day's Journey and Tonight by Eugene O'Neill, for example. I mean, that is a heavy play.
Again, yeah, you get to see that somebody taps into various things within their sort of acting power and plays down other elements. But sometimes comedy is serious as well. You can play a comic character, but you're not playing the clown. There's nothing clown-like about a Sybil. And so very often people underestimate the ability of people to switch from comedy to serious acting and vice versa, because a lot of the time you're tapping into some fundamental acting strengths, if you like, which translate quite well to both challenges, if you like.
Yeah, Mike, thank you so much. Just before you go, actually, what do you think her legacy will be?
Well, I just think she is most famous by far for one role, and 12 episodes only of the greatest comedy of all time. If you're associated with nothing else, that's something to leave behind.
Thank you so much, Mike Ward, their TV critic of the Daily Express and Daily Star. Chris has been in touch from Birmingham and says, I'm so upset we've lost Prunella Scales. What a beautiful lady. Debbie also said, I'm so sad regarding Prunella Scales. Debbie actually went to the stage show of Fawlty Towers. It's still proving. Do you know who's in one of those stage shows, actually? You know Noreen Skinner, who does the Liz Truss sort of impressions of Liz Truss and Rachel Reeves and so on. Noreen's hilarious. It's absolutely brilliant. I actually think her Nadine Dorries is the best of all of them. And Nadine's brilliant. You should follow her on Instagram. She's really, really funny. But she was in one of the Fawlty Towers stage shows. So to this day, 50 years on, they still inspire. And actually, here is a little known fact you're not going to hear anywhere else. Alistair Darling, remember him, the former Chancellor when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister? His cat was called Sybil and was named after the Fawlty Towers character. That is just one of those really random pieces of information I just have in my head. Lots more to discuss, including what's in the Sun tomorrow. John Lucas, the Night News editor, will be with us in just a minute. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's find out what is in the Sun tomorrow, and just before we do, their top story is about a 49-year-old man who died and 2 others injured following a stabbing in Uxbridge in London on Monday afternoon. Police have confirmed that the 22-year-old man arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder is an Afghan national. We've literally just got a line in the last few minutes. The breaking line saying the Afghan national who was arrested after a man who was stabbed to death in Uxbridge on Monday arrived in the UK via a lorry in 2020 and was granted asylum and leave to remain in 2022. That is the breaking line that we can bring you this evening here on Talk. John Lucas is the night news editor of The Sun. John, I know that's news to you as well. You've just come up from the Sun newsroom to us. Just tell us your reaction to that in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so this is horrific. There's lots of videos online that I wouldn't recommend watching. Absolutely horrific crime that happened in Uxbridge yesterday afternoon. We've had reporters on the ground there, so obviously have to be slightly careful because proceedings are active in this case. We wouldn't want to prejudice anything, any potential trial, but what we understand has happened is there's been an incident in a house which we believe is a council-owned property. It's spilled out into the street. Now, there's the guy who's sadly lost his life, this 49-year-old man, was a dog walker passing by. He's tried to intervene, and you can see that he's savagely attacked in the street. He was stabbed multiple times. He sadly lost his life. Now, there's another man who's badly injured, and a younger man, I think he was 14 is the age given, who was also injured in this incident. Now, the guy who's been arrested is Afghan national. He was running away from the police, and you can see in some of the footage he was tasered and brought down. Lots of questions about who this guy is. You know, as you say, the line now is that he'd arrived 2020 in a lorry. We were told earlier, we got some guidance earlier, that he wasn't a boat migrant, but that he did have leave to remain. There's also some talk that he might have been here a lot longer than 2020, potentially has arrived as a child, but all these things will come out in the mix.
Yeah.
If, you know, the point at which you sort of start to learn more about people facing these allegations is when, if they get charged, and then you'll get the name, and then we'll be in court tomorrow for it. We'll also, I mean, we do know the, you know, I think that a lot of the local people know the identity of the guy who,
because he was living in the house,
who's lost his life, and by all accounts, he's a very, very nice guy. Lots of people knew him on his dog rounds, and I'm sure we will hear lots more about him and his family.
As you say, the information does trickle out over time, and of course you can get the very latest on the Sun website, thesun.co.uk, and in the paper tomorrow. Let's talk about what's happening at between Buckingham Palace and Royal Lodge. This is, of course, great story the other day from you guys about the fact that Andrew wants 2 homes to give up for Royal Lodge. What's the latest here?
Yeah, 2 pads Andy. Well, we had 2 pads Rainer, didn't we? Or was it 3 pads in the end? I can't remember how many it grew to.
Yes.
2 pads Andy because...
0 stamp duty anyway.
Exactly. And, well, exactly. And in Andy's case, 0 rent for 20 years is what we learnt. So he's in Royal Lodge, 31-room mansion. It does feel like he's going to have to leave that place. And there are some alternative sites he can go to, which are still very nice. Which is Frogmore, which would be one of them, which we had that story already, and there's this idea that his erstwhile wife, Sarah Ferguson, Fergie, wanted Adelaide Cottage, and there's a lot of, it's getting quite hot with these, the different camps now, because there's suggestion that Fergie had asked for Adelaide Cottage, actually, then her camp saying no, I was offered it back then, and then the other camp saying no, she's I won't go into all of the the details, but it's getting quite feisty between them as they try and figure this out. Now,
tell us about the slurry pit.
Well, yes, this could be the solution to all to where they go. So
Fergie to the slurry pit.
That's right. So we know, obviously, the King is a big environmentalist, massively keen gardener, and yeah, at Sandringham, he has submitted plans to build a huge manure lagoon, as it's been described to us.
Why does he want to build a manure lagoon?
Well, it could get because it will be for the grounds and the
farming,
horticulture, the farming, and all that.
Okay.
But this is going to be just a kilometre away from Anmer Hall, which, as everybody knows, is the country home for Kate and William.
So they're not too happy. It's raising a bit of a stink.
It will do, and if you live near any of these things, it can, a mile away is nothing. And there's also this bit weird. I don't know if you caught it, Emily Maitlis on the podcast that she does, come out with this suggestion that Prince William, amid this Andy row, had suggested that he would strip Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie of their titles if Andy... It's almost like a bit of a Godfather move. Nice titles you've got there.
Well, I'm not surprised. Yeah, shame if someone stripped you of them.
I mean, I don't know how true that is. It was leading the websites for a long time.
But that's an interesting point in terms of the bargaining that they have to do. You know, why, when Andrew has nothing to lose, he's being very bullish. At what point did he say, Charles can ring him and say, you're not going to use the title? He can say, well, I'll use it if I want to. And they say, well, actually, hold on a second, what about your daughters? We can strip them of the titles as well. It's interesting with the, just to go back to the slurry pit, as I want to, I'm reading here that it's the size of 4 Olympic swimming pools. On tabloid newspapers, you have various ways of describing things like how big a country is in comparison to Wales, for example. But Olympic swimming pools is a classic in terms of how big things are, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The height of a double-decker bus.
Height of a double-decker bus, yeah.
I'll try and think of some more, but yeah, we
definitely a Wheels is,
we like to measure things
5 times the size of Wheels, yeah, absolutely. Or I also like the ones where you could go like 327 times to the moon, for example.
Yes.
You do that as well. Yeah. Let's talk about another story. The parents of a drug-mule teenager are set to appeal a presidential pardon to allow her to leave a grim ex-Soviet jail. Tell us about this grim story.
Yes, so Bella Cully, look, she's a 19-year-old girl. She got herself into a really ridiculous situation in Georgia, obviously ex-Soviet country, big ally of Vladimir Putin's Russia at the moment. So she was caught smuggling £200,000 worth of cannabis from Thailand, and her argument is, well, I was forced to do this by this violent drugs gang. So she was arrested and she was fined £215,000. Now, if she'd have been able to pay that fine, as we understand it, they would have let her go. Her family went on this huge fundraising drive. They raised £140,000 and paid that much of the fine, and that's reduced some of the sentence. But she's still going to have to do some time, and the important thing is that she's pregnant, and she's going to give birth before Christmas. Amazingly, under Georgian law, if she was already a mother, so if she'd have given birth the day before the sentence, she wouldn't be incarcerated.
Right.
Because she's pregnant, she's going to have to go to prison. She'll give birth in the prison, and the baby will have to spend the first few months of its life in jail. And the family are asking for a pardon, so I have to try and get the guy's name right. If you're an ex-Manchester City fan, if you're a Manchester City fan, you'll know him as a former player. So it's Mikhail Kavalashvili. He used to play for City.
Right.
Perhaps he has some sympathies for Brits, although he is a big pal of Putin. But hopefully they'll get this appeal in, and he'll show some mercy.
Very interesting story. We'll see what happens there. And also a historical story as well in the Sun tomorrow about Horatio Nelson. Tell us about this.
Yeah. Well, never let it be said that we don't do the serious,
of course,
historical stories. So we've got a story about Lord Admiral Nelson. Now, if you've ever had a mistress, not that I would condone having a mistress,
right?
You know it can be a bit expensive. trying to juggle your wife and mistress. But Nelson, documents have come to light that showed that actually it was even more expensive for him because he had to pay for her and he also had to pay for her husband's wine store.
Okay.
So this is a letter from Nelson to his wine merchant.
Right.
And he was having an affair with Lady Emma Hamilton. So he paid for 36 bottles of claret to her husband, Sir William Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with this. They had a very long-running affair, very controversial at the time. I think it was 6 years. And the three of them travelled around almost as we'd call it a throuple today.
Oh, I kind of remember this. Yeah.
We'd call it a throuple in the David Hay mould, but Sir William was significantly older,
right?
Which is maybe how he got away with it. Lady Hamilton had a baby, but as we find out today, part of the payoff here was that Nelson was paying for the guy's wine, which is the least he could do.
Well, it's interesting. 36 bottles of claret for one mistress. That's her ratio of 36 to 1.
Oh, very good.
Thank you.
I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've thought of another one actually as well, which is how many times something goes around the world. Like you could line these, like for tabloid ease stuff, like how many times something goes around the world, and also it's like driving between Lance and Groningen like 27 times or whatever.
Yes.
So those kind of units, units of measurement. But the best one is a Wales, which is how big a country is. Listen, I will very much look forward to the stories tomorrow, especially the Horatio Nelson one in the paper. That's John Lucas. He is the night news editor of The Sun, and you can read all those stories at thesun.co.uk when they drop in a few hours' time, and of course in the paper tomorrow you can pick up from your newsagent. Lots to discuss. We've got plenty of calls lined up, and we will talk about migration, about Jeremy Corbyn in the pantomime, and indeed about the military and what their role, if any, should be in regard to asylum seekers. Lots to discuss here on Talk. Let me know your thoughts. If you want to get your call in the next 15 minutes, lift the phone. Now's the time. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
violence went up in our prisons. Self-harm went up in our prisons. Drug abuse went up in our prisons. And prison officer numbers were cut under his watch. William Fernandez was released in error in March 2021. He was a sexual predator. He raped a 16-year-old and sexually assaulted another young woman after he was let out by prison in 2021. Was there an independent investigation? No.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch. We'll take a couple of calls in a minute. I just want to remind you about what Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, has been saying about the London grooming gangs situation. He took aim at the Mayor, Sir Sadiq Khan. He talked about this yesterday at the Reform UK press conference. This is what Nigel Farage has been saying.
He's been denying that there's grooming going on in London. The police, the Met, have been denying grooming is going on in London. I can tell you today, somebody who's in this room has spoken to social services in London who've openly said there are grooming gangs in London. And of course, it's more difficult to spot a particular type of grooming gang in central London than it is in Rotherham, just by the sheer size of the city, by the different communities that live in this city. Yes, maybe, Maggie Oliver made this point, you know, maybe London is the last great grooming scandal to be uncovered. And it looks like we're very, very close to that.
Nigel Farage talking about that at the Reform UK press conference yesterday. There's actually another press conference that Reform UK are going to have tomorrow. I imagine this will come up, as will a number of other issues. Zia Youssef, who is their head of policy, will be taking that one. We'll of course report on that if there's anything significant to tell you tomorrow on Drive. I'm on Drive all week between 4 and 7, so I'll see you tomorrow at 4. Just on Nigel Farage and what he was saying in regard to rape gangs in London, the response as well, let's play this, of the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan.
Make sure that no stone is left unturned in relation to this appalling, heinous, horrific crime. And so I've asked the police to be fully transparent, and that's one of the reasons why they've shared with Londoners and those across the country that as part of the national inquiry, the national review, the police will be going back 15 years, looking at all the cases under the government's, under the inquiry's definition. That includes group-based child sexual exploitation. It will also include peer-to-peer child sexual exploitation, intrafamilial child sexual exploitation, that exploitation that took place in institutions like care homes, peer-to-peer exploitation, criminal gangs as well, to make sure no stone is left unturned to address this heinous crime.
Sadiq Khan there, the Mayor of London. Let's talk to Laurie in Merseyside. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Laurie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good to speak to you, Peter. What I think is that using the barracks for the boat people is an ideal solution.
Okay.
And they wouldn't need that much security adding to them. But the main security wouldn't involve the police from London or the police from another city. We can use the military police.
The military police, okay.
Military police,
Yeah.
and they would frighten anybody.
Well, it's interesting, actually, you mentioned that, because they will need some security, but the thing is that the migrants will be able to come and go as they please, just as they've been able to do at the hotel. So it's not as if we're keeping them there. They can, of course, go into the local towns and villages as well.
I'm not sure that they should be allowed out. After all, they're committing an offence by getting into the country illegally. But I really do think the military police should be used more. I used to be a magistrate, and if the military police escorted a soldier who was in trouble into the court, my God, we all shook. They were so frightening, and they're so strict. And, use the military police instead of them just sitting around doing very little at the moment. But take them down to the barracks and give them some accommodation. But at the same time, we've got these immigrants coming in who need treating a little bit more severely. Don't mean cruelly, but severely.
Yes. Well, there has to be some sort of deterrent, Laurie, doesn't there? There has to be some form of saying, well, you can't just live it up in a hotel. You've got to be, yes, we'll accommodate you. Some people say we shouldn't at all. I wonder what Kevin thinks. He's in the East Midlands. Kevin, what do you think?
To be honest, I mean, I'm new to talk radio, so...
Well, thanks for the call, and thanks for giving us a ring. I really appreciate it, Kevin. It's great to have you on the air.
Yeah, I've come across it recently, and it's all I have on in the car now, to
Brilliant.
be fair.
Glad to hear it.
It's a bit of common sense.
Absolutely.
I just want to say, I mean, I've been listening a lot today on my rather long evening commute, and you're hearing about processing. I mean, can any of the previous government that come on, or the current government, as we call them, actually read the room? And it's not processing, it's deport.
Yeah.
Do they think the victims of recent crimes like that horrendous guy who then got let free, they want to hear, well, you're going to process more and let them wander around someone else's streets?
It's a very good point, Kevin, and you make it well. I suppose the point is that, well, one of the points anyway, is that processing is taking ages. That both Reform UK and the Conservatives' policy now is that if you arrive on our shores illegally, if you come on a small boat, well, actually, there's no way that you will ever be processed. You're going to be sent back. But then, of course, many people say that's fine for Reform UK to say that. They haven't been in government. How would that operate? And it's fine for the Conservatives to say, because you could basically say whatever you want in opposition. Why didn't they do it over 14 years in government?
Well, that is true, but, you know, as proved with this guy, when they eventually caught him after letting him go, they can suddenly get rid of people. But that's got to be the ultimate deterrent. Give them nothing. They're entitled to nothing, like the Australian model, and that's it. You know, I mean, you got British victims and they've got to listen to, well, we're just going to process them and let them wander around the street and hope they don't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. And after a year as well, they can do some work as well. So that's... You know, okay, there are lots of vacancies and so on, but that's for those asylum seekers as well. That's something they can do, and they're presumably taking money away from other people who might, in theory, want those jobs anyway. What is the solution, Kevin? What do you think we should do about the small boats?
Well, it's they get a cushy life if they come here, and if you follow like the Australian policy, you're not entitled. Therefore, you're not here. You're here legally, and then they don't come here anymore because. Or they could, you know, like the one that came back. Well, I don't want to be in France because it's not an easy life. I want to go back to England because it's a 5-star hotel, and I don't really have to live in a tent, so to speak.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. Kevin, where is your how long is your commute then? How long are you in the car?
Well, today it's been a bit extra long. I think I got in the car at 4, and I'm probably going to get out of it about 7:30, I think. But...
Goodness me, that is a long journey, definitely. I used to live in the East Midlands, actually. I was briefly a reporter at BBC Radio Derby back in the day.
Derby? Okay, I've been in Loughborough tonight, so I've not been far from Derby.
Yeah. No, I had a great time at BBC Radio Derby, actually. Really, really nice people, and learned a lot as well. I remember there's a pub, the Shire is beautiful, and there was a guy at a pub who, they did hen racing. Every year they did hen racing, and he was also a UFO expert. And my first question was, are you worried the UFOs will come down and interfere with the hen racing?
Yeah, that's it. I might go over and watch that. It sounds like an interesting show.
He said he hadn't considered the fact that the two might clash. So there we are. Kevin, appreciate it. Safe home, and thank you. Oh, thank you so much for that. But we had a little little cameo there from Samara Gill's phone there. Could have been a whole lot worse, but it wasn't. Samara, great to see you. What's coming up on your show?
Well, I was going to say hen racing. What about cockfighting? That's impressive. That's a sport that I.
Hen racing, I think, is probably all right. Although some people do tortoise racing, things like that. But
yeah, they do. Yeah. I've also bought you these. Your handover with Ian was about Maltesers.
It was. That's very kind of you.
Yes, I know as the newcomer, I need to big gift. So there you go. There you go. I know it'll take a lot more, but
well, Samara, you don't need Maltesers. Your charm, wit, and presenting ability is all that is needed. Intelligence as well, of course. There was a guy who went to university with. His grandfather came up with a machine that made Maltesers, sort of spins them round.
Well, that's the Nepo baby I want to be. That's the type that I need
free Maltesers.
Correct.
At the end of it, yeah. Mr. Malteser's grandson, a guy called Will Semengo Turner. So there we are. Haven't seen him since university.
Double barrel.
Very on brand for my university, let me tell you.
Very much.
Tell me what is coming up in the show.
I mean, to go on a more serious note, in West Drayton, West London, there has been a triple stabbing. Now, we have just learned about 8 minutes ago that it was by